Chapter 226. After confirmation, this place was more than 8,000 miles away from Guiyan Market and less than 2,000 miles away from Huiyan Mountain. The water of this small lake flowed north through the mountain stream. After leaving the boundary of the Huiyan mountain range, the stream flowed towards the north for more than 5,000 miles, and merged into the Luling River north of the mountain. Luling River was the longest river in Huiyan Mountain. Its water came from the mountain stream at the north foot of Huiyan Mountain. It flowed north, across grasslands, deserts, and all the way to the Arctic tundra. The river water in the cultivation world was mixed with spiritual energy, so it was not easy to freeze. Before the river flowed into the tundra, although it was cold, it did not freeze. When it flowed into the tundra, the river water flowed all year round. That was how the name Luling River came to be. The map Wang Daoyuan bought introduced the Luling River in great detail. There was a tributary on the west side of Luling River called Hanshui River. Its source was very close to the source of the Xianin River. From the small lake, one could follow the current into Luling River and then enter Hanshui River. Going against the current, one could reach the source of the Xianin River. Wang Daoyuan used the cloud mist escape in the river. His speed was comparable to a first-level foundation establishment cultivator flying on a sword. He could travel more than 1,000 miles in 2 hours. Moreover, the consumption of spiritual energy was slightly less than that of flying on a sword. Most importantly, using the cloud mist escape in the water would not be tracked. Even if the Guiyuan sword sect sent people to find him, they could use special methods to trace the traces left behind by his earth escape and follow him all the way to the underground river. Then they could follow the underground river and follow it downstream. But after leaving the underground river and arriving at the small lake, they could not continue to follow him. Because he could fly away on his sword wherever he went, the people tracking him could not be sure where he left from. When flying on a sword in the air, the aura and other traces left behind would disappear in an instant. Although there were wars in Shannon from time to time, there was still the deterrence of the 3 major sects, so it was still peaceful. There were many treasure-hunting cultivators, but they did not dare to rob openly. They would only do it in places where there were few people. Things were different in Shannon. None of the sects had an overwhelming advantage. Other than the areas around the properties of large and medium-sized forces, where the treasure-hunting cultivators did not dare to casually make a move, the other areas were outside the law. 100 miles away from the returning wild goose market, there was a possibility of being ambushed by cultivators who wanted to snatch the treasure at any time. Sword kinesis flight was too obvious a target, and the possibility of being ambushed was very high. Although Wang Daoyuan's strength was far superior to his peers, it was still difficult for him to win against a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. However, most of the cultivators who wanted to snatch treasures were late foundation establishment cultivators. After all, if one wanted to snatch treasures, they had to have the strength to do so. If he were to encounter a cultivator who wanted to steal his treasure, he would most likely be forced to flee like a rat. It would be safer to use the cloud mist escape in the water. Moreover, the monsters in the north of the mountain were much stronger than those in the south. No one dared to stop them when they ran around. If a human cultivator killed the bloodline of a high-level demonic beast, it would be a big deal. Fortunately, there were fewer aquatic monsters in the north of the mountain, and there were no high-level monsters, so there were no obstacles in the water. He followed the flow of the stream and used the cloud mist escape all the way. It only took him 10 hours to reach the main stream of Luling River. The aquatic monsters he encountered along the way were either first stage or second stage low grade. Their speed could not keep up with him at all, and they were soon left behind. Following the Luling River north for more than 1,000 miles, he reached the mouth of the Hanshui River. He entered the mouth of the river without thinking. As soon as he entered the Hanshui River, he was frightened by the river water. This river water was indeed worthy of the name Hanshui River. Wang Daoyuan was soaked in the river water, shivering from the cold. The map also mentioned that the water of the Hanshui River was bone-chilling, but Wang Daoyuan did not take it seriously. Cultivators at the early stage of qi refining were not afraid of the cold and heat. He was already at the 3rd level of foundation establishment, and cultivating the 5-spirit immortal transformation technique also had the effect of strengthening his body. How could he be afraid of the cold? In the end, he really could not withstand this cold river water. He used fire's spiritual energy to protect his body, and stayed in the river water for half an hour, carefully feeling the cold air in the river water. At first, the cold air only stayed on the surface of his skin, and he could not feel anything unusual. Then, the cold air gradually penetrated his muscles and meridians, and the spiritual energy in his body began to flow unsmoothly. Finally, the cold air invaded his knowledge sea, and even his soul felt a chill. The cold chi in the frigid river was definitely not a simple cold. It was a mixture of yin chi and cold chi. He immediately went ashore. If he stayed in the water for too long, he might get frostbite. Injuries to the body were easy to heal, but the cold air also affected the soul. Once the soul was injured, it would be troublesome. The source of the Hanshui River was not far from Hell Valley. It must have been affected by the Gue Water Nether Spring. It was a pity that the Hanshui River was thousands of miles long, with many tributaries flowing into it. The cold air in the river water was very impure, and not suitable to nourish the inked jade lotus. Using mist escape in the water was not feasible. On the ground, his speed was slow, and he could easily be attacked by land demons. He could only obediently fly on his sword. Huang Wanli's identity was already registered in the Origin Sword sect. He could not use it anymore and had to change it. He used a disguise art, changing his appearance to be similar to Zhou Ming's, and changed his name to Zhou Ming. He took out the fleeting flame sword he got from Zhou Xian and rushed to the profound Yin River. After learning the Origin Sword art, Wang Daoyuan's speed increased. Even without the startling wind sword, he could fly 2,000 miles in 2 hours. The Hanshui River's mouth was only 7,000 to 8,000 miles away from the source of the profound Yin River. After flying west for half an hour, he met 2 people flying in his direction. The 2, one in front and one behind, seemed to be chasing each other. He did not want to get involved in a stranger's business, so he flew north to avoid the 2. Wang Daoyuan did not want to meddle in other people's business, but it just had to happen to him. When the one running saw Wang Daoyuan, it was as if he saw a life-saving straw and chased him with all his might. Wang Daoyuan did not understand what was going on. He did not know if the 2 were chasing him, or if the 2 were chasing him. His flying speed was very fast. It was very difficult for a normal middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator to catch up to him. However, these 2 people were not flying on their swords. The one running in front was at the 5th stage of foundation establishment. He was standing on a black banner, which was emitting a ghostly aura. The one chasing him was at the 6th stage of foundation establishment. He was standing on a wheel-shaped magic tool made of white bones. It was obvious that these 2 people were evil cultivators. However, the speed at which they flew on their weapons was actually slightly faster than his own. If this continued, he would be caught up very soon. The cultivator standing on the black banner shouted, "Dao Yu in front, save my life." "I will definitely thank you." Wang Daoyuan replied, "I am only at the early stage of foundation establishment. How can I save you? I have no intention of getting involved in your battle. Stop bothering me." The cultivator standing on the black banner said angrily, "Even if I die, I will drag someone down with me. If you are not willing to save me, then let's die together." The cultivator standing on the bone wool smiled. "That's for the best. Buy one get one free. I can use your bones to refine magic tools." Wang Daoyuan wanted to kill them. Originally, he only wanted to quietly run to the source of the mystic Yin River to collect pure Yin Qi. He did not want to cause trouble. However, if he did not want to cause trouble, trouble would come knocking on his door. It was too conspicuous to fight in the air. No matter what kind of Dharma spell he used, it would be easy for others to see. It was better to find a secluded place to deal with these 2 reckless people. As for whether he could defeat them or not, there was no need to consider. With the Earth Divine Thunder, these two evil cultivators were just food. Moreover, he had 3 Gui water thunder pearls that could kill a peak foundation establishment cultivator. The 5 elements divine thunder was not too powerful against normal cultivators. However, there was still a gap between it and those ultimate moves that needed to be charged for a long time. Its biggest advantage was that it could be used quickly. However, it was a natural counter to these evil cultivators. Evil Dharma spells were most afraid of lightning. The 5 elements divine thunder was more than twice as powerful against evil Dharma spells. Chapter 227. Wang Daoyuan flew in the air and could see the scenery 1,000 miles away, so it was easy for him to find a suitable place. 100 miles north of the cold water river, there was a tall mountain with lush vegetation. The mountainside was surrounded by clouds and mist, and the scenery was beautiful. It was a good place to kill, to punish evil. He used all his strength to control his sword and flew towards the tall mountain, using the mountain and the vegetation as cover to take care of these 2 reckless people. When the 2 evil cultivators saw his speed increase, they also used all their strength to activate the magic tools under their feet and chased after him. The tall mountain was only 100 miles away from the 3 of them. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Wang Daoyuan arrived above the mountain. He did not stay in the air and quickly descended into the clouds halfway up the mountain. The 2 evil cultivators followed closely behind. The cultivator with the black banner shouted, "Daoyu, you and I are both the target of this old thief Bai Sheng. If we stand by and do nothing, both of us will die in his hands. If you and I work together, we can definitely defeat that old thief Bai Sheng. If we can kill him, I don't want a single thing on him and give it all to Daoyu. If we can't kill him, I'll compensate Daoyu with a second-tier mid-grade magic tool. How about it?" Wang Daoyuan jumped out from a big tree and said, "Daoyu is right, I also have the same intention." Bai Sheng sneered, "Even if the 2 of you work together, you're still not my match. Besides, even if you can defeat me, can a 3rd-level foundation establishment kid like you deal with a despicable person like Du Heng?" Wang Daoyuan did not mind and said, "After you take down Daoyu, won't I have to deal with you, a 6th-level foundation establishment cultivator? I choose the lesser of 2 evils. I think the chances of escaping from a 5th-level foundation establishment cultivator are higher." Du Heng laughed, "This little brother is still sensible and won't fall for your trick. Old thief Bai Sheng, you don't have the confidence to take down the 2 of us, so you should retreat as soon as possible. If you insist on fighting, it's inevitable that both of you will be injured. In a place like the northern part of the mountain, being seriously injured is a 90% chance of survival. You don't want to give away your 100 years of accumulation to others for nothing, right?" Bai Sheng thought for a while and said, "That's reasonable. If this little brother is not weak, it will indeed be difficult for me to take you down. But if I don't measure it, how can I know this little brother's strength?" With that, he threw out the white bone wheel in his hand. The white bone wheel spun rapidly and flew towards Wang Daoyuan. Naturally, he would not take it. The evil cultivator's magic tool was not necessarily powerful, but he definitely had the most tricks up his sleeves. This white bone wheel was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Was not to entangle. Of the white bone wheel was not also not to his feet. His feet weren't idle either. He used the divine movement technique to avoid the white bone wheel. Tu Daoyu Daidea da 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 da. For breaths later, the red and yellow balls of spiritual power turned into a flaming meteor and smashed towards the bone wheel. On the other side, the white bone wheel had just dispersed the fire python when it flew toward Wang Daoyuan again. The fire meteorite and the white bone wheel collided. The white bone wheel was repelled, and the fire meteorite was completely shattered. Bai Sheng's expression changed. He did not expect Wang Daoyuan to be able to take his attack unscathed. Du Heng laughed. "I didn't expect this little brother to be so capable to be able to take Bai Sheng's attack head-on. Bai Sheng, it's not a matter of whether you let us go or not, but whether you can leave alive." After he finished speaking, he waved the black banner in his hand, and 2 streams of black smoke rushed toward Bai Sheng. Wang Daoyuan used his divine sense to probe and found that the black smoke was mixed with yin qi, resentment, and evil qi. If he was hit, he would lose a layer of skin even if he did not die. The two streams of black smoke wrapped around Bai Sheng. Bai Sheng would not sit still and wait for death. He threw the white bone wool at the black smoke. Although the two streams of black smoke were fast, they did not seem to be very strong. They should not be able to withstand the white bone wheel. When the white bone will hit the black smoke, the two streams of black smoke wrapped around the white bone wheel. The black smoke was very tough. No matter how hard the white bone will struggled, it could not get rid of it. Du Heng's eyes revealed joy, and he mocked, "Bai Sheng, is that all you can do?" Seeing that the two of them were in a stalemate, Wang Daoyuan condensed fire and earth spirit power again, preparing to use the meteorite fall technique to attack Bai Sheng. Bai Sheng was not a simple person. His divine sense had been locked onto Wang Daoyuan, and he could attack him at any time. As a 6th-level foundation establishment cultivator, Bai Sheng naturally would not be taken down so easily. He channeled his spirit power into the white bone wheel. In the center of the white bone wheel was a circular bone plate about a foot in diameter. 9 long bones were evenly inserted into the circular bone plate. At the end of each long bone was a skeleton. As he injected his spirit power, one of the skeleton's spirit power fluctuations became intense. Then, the skeleton spat out a gust of cold wind and blew toward the two streams of black smoke. In a moment, the two streams of black smoke were blown away. Seeing this, Du Heng waved the black banner and withdrew the remaining black smoke. Then, he poured a large amount of spirit power into the black banner. 5 streams of black smoke flew out and hit the white bone wheel. The black smoke flew closer, and the skeletons on the white bone wheel spat out an even more violent cold wind. The 5 streams of black smoke did not last long before they were blown away by the cold wind again. Bai Sheng sneered and said, "How about this?" Then, he drove the white bone wool to attack Du Heng. Du Heng snorted and poured all the spirit power in his body into the black banner. The spirit power on the black banner instantly boiled. After a moment, the black spirit power on the banner condensed into a ball, and the banner turned white. The black spirit power ball turned into a black tiger that was more than 3 meters long. When the white bone wheel attacked, the black tiger opened its mouth and bit the white bone wheel. Bai Sheng forcefully activated the white bone wheel several times, but there was no reaction. Du Heng's face revealed joy, and the black tiger's 2 front claws also grabbed the white bone wheel. The black spirit power seemed to be extremely corrosive, and the white bone wheel emitted a sizzling sound of corrosion. In a short period of time, the white bone wheel would not be seriously damaged, but in a long time, it was hard to say. Wang Daoyuan originally wanted to use the meteor fall technique to attack Bai Sheng. But seeing that the two of them were fighting back and forth, and were only using their divine sense to guard against him and not take the initiative to attack, he simply stored up more spirit power and used the meteor fall technique. The white bone wheel was controlled, but Bai Sheng did not show the slightest bit of panic. After a moment, the 9 skulls on the white bone wheel shone brightly at the same time. The 9 skulls each spat out a type of spirit power. The 5 elements, ice, wind, and thunder, and the non-elemental spirit power. The spirit power of each attribute condensed into a spell and attacked the black tiger. These spells all carried a sinister aura and were not orthodox spells of the 5 elements or 3 elements. But their power was still not to be underestimated. The 9 spells exploded at the same time, and the black tiger was instantly blown to pieces. The aftermath of the explosion sent the white bone wheel flying, but the white bone wheel was not seriously damaged. Du Heng was not so lucky. The two of them used all their strength to attack and collided beside him. The aftermath of the explosion sent him flying dozens of feet away. If it was a spell of an ordinary cultivator, he might have a chance of survival. But both of them were evil cultivators, and their spirit power contained all kinds of yin qi, evil qi, and the like. It was useless in a confrontation of spells, but when it hit the body, the collateral damage caused was very strong. Du Heng had already used all his strength, and he was hit at close range. With the collateral damage, it was impossible for him to survive. Du Heng was already dead. Bai Xing withdrew the white bone wheel and said with a smile, Du Heng is dead. I wonder how Dao Yu will resist my 9-spirit white bone wheel. Wang Daoyuan smiled and did not answer. The spirit power ball in his hand had already been accumulated and could be shot out at any time. It was just that when he saw the two of them fighting, he did not have the nerve to disturb them. Now, Du Heng was completely defeated, and it was his turn. He controlled the spirit power ball in his hand to fly into the air, and a flaming meteorite flew out of the spirit power ball and hit Bai Xing. Chapter 228. Bai Xing's white bone wheel was already damaged. If he continued to use it to block the meteorites, it might be completely destroyed. The white bone wheel was his main magic weapon. He was not willing to let it be destroyed like this. He took out another white bone shield. When the flaming meteorites hit the shield was not damaged at all. Wang Daoyuan still had a lot of spiritual energy left. He threw out another 4 flaming meteorites, but they were all firmly blocked by the white bone shield. The white bone shield was only dimmed, but it was not damaged. It only needed to be nourished for a while to recover. Although he was not proficient in using the meteor fall technique, and its power was far from Zhou Xian's when he killed the blood cloud python, the fact that the white bone shield could withstand it meant that it was not an ordinary item. Seeing that the white bone shield was intact, Bai Xing smiled and said, Dao Yu, if you don't have any other tricks, just surrender. By the way, I'll ask for Dao Yu's name. When I collect your soul, it's easier to shout your name. Wang Daoyuan was so angry that he laughed. A level 6 foundation establishment evil practitioner, at his peak, could teach him a lesson with the Wu to divine thunder. What's more, he had used too much spiritual energy. He could not use the 2 magic weapons for a while. Wang Daoyuan smiled and said, when I'm outside, I prepared a few more names. Dao Yu, which one do you want to know? Bai Xing said angrily, you really don't know what's good for you. How dare you play with me? Then, he gathered fire attribute spiritual energy in his palm. Then, he waved his hand and the fire attribute spiritual energy turned into a flaming long sword, which slashed towards Wang Daoyuan. The evil practitioner's magic contained yin qi, evil qi, and other things, so it could not be taken directly. Wang Daoyuan used the smoke escape and dodged to the side. Bai Xing saw his escape technique and immediately became excited. What a brilliant escape technique. Kid, give me your escape technique and I'll spare your life. This place was more than 20,000 miles away from the Wang family's territory. It was not strange that the wandering practitioners in this area did not recognize the Wang family's smoke escape technique. However, Bai Xing's fire attribute spell wasn't bad. It wasn't a common spell like the Golden Blade spell. Its power was about 3 times that of the Golden Blade spell, and its speed was also a lot faster. Wang Daoyuan replied, you want my escape technique with your meager abilities. On the other hand, your flaming saber isn't bad. Its power is much stronger than common spells. However, if you give me the spell, I won't let you live. Bai Xing was furious. He condensed a flying rock and smashed it towards Wang Daoyuan. Wang Daoyuan once again used smoke escape, easily dodging the attack. Bai Xing continued to condense a silver-white longsword and a water dragon, attacking Wang Daoyuan. This time, Wang Daoyuan felt a bit strange. Bai Xing could actually use spells of 4 elements. Although multi-attribute cultivation techniques were not rare, most of them had 2 or 3 attributes. 5 attribute cultivation techniques were extremely rare, and 4 attribute cultivation techniques were unheard of. Penta-spirit veins cultivators didn't pursue cultivation speed. 5 element cultivation techniques focused on fighting ability, and had the advantage of fast recovery speed. 2 or 3 elemental cultivation methods were meant to ensure that the cultivation speed was not too slow, and they pursued the strength of a battle. For attribute cultivation techniques didn't have the advantage of fast recovery speed of 5-element cultivation techniques, and the cultivation speed couldn't increase. Without both advantages, no one cultivated this thing at all. Therefore, this Bai Sheng was very likely to be a penta-spirit veins cultivator who also cultivated 5-element cultivation techniques. He asked tentatively, "You're a penta-spirit veins cultivator?" Bai Sheng said confidently, "I'm indeed a penta-spirit veins cultivator." "How about it? Do you still dare to boast shamelessly?" Wang Daoyuan urged his spiritual power to stimulate all 5 attributes. He smiled and said, "It's really rare. After cultivating for so many years, I've finally seen a foundation establishment cultivator with the same penta-spirit veins." Bai Sheng also smiled and said, "Don't talk about you. I've lived for more than 100 years, and this is also the first time I've seen other penta-spirit veins cultivators. Seeing that we're both penta-spirit veins cultivators, I'll let you go if you hand over the escape technique and the spell that shot out the flying flame rock." Wang Daoyuan chuckled and said, "I have a brilliant spell here, I wonder if you're interested." Bai Sheng thought that he was enlightened and said excitedly, "Kid, you're quite smart. If you were like this earlier, I wouldn't have to waste so much effort." After saying that, Bai Sheng suddenly rushed forward, wanting to launch a thunderous attack while Wang Daoyuan was relaxed. Wang Daoyuan put his left hand behind his back and raised his right hand. An earth divine thunder was instantly formed and shot towards Bai Sheng. Bai Sheng used his spiritual consciousness and felt the might of the thunderbolt. He was scared out of his wits. Unfortunately, his body was rushing forward and the earth divine thunder was too fast for him to dodge. He could only take out the white bone shield and take the earth divine thunder head-on. The white bone shield was also a mid-grade level 2 magic weapon. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be difficult for it to block the earth divine thunder. However, the earth divine thunder countered evil cultivators' spells and magic weapons. After taking the earth divine thunder head-on, 3 cracks appeared on the white bone shield. One of the cracks even went through the entire surface of the shield. Naturally, Wang Daoyuan wouldn't just stand there and watch. The second and third earth divine thunder followed. The speed of the earth divine thunder could be said to be the fastest among spells of the same level. Without a brilliant escape technique, it was impossible to dodge it. Bai Sheng could only take it head-on. 3 consecutive earth divine thunders hit the white bone shield. After a dozen consecutive cracking sounds, the white bone shield shattered into dozens of pieces. Bai Sheng himself was also sent flying several feet away by the impact of the earth divine thunder. Wang Daoyuan predicted where he would land and cast a quagmire spell. Bai Sheng's entire body fell into a muddy pit with a diameter of about 10 feet. He had exhausted too much spiritual energy and was injured by the earth divine thunder. He couldn't break free from the quagmire spell. In just a few breaths' time, only his head was left outside. He couldn't fight back at all. He also noticed that the quagmire spell was corroding his body. He hurriedly raised his spiritual energy to defend himself. Wang Daoyuan walked over and cast an earth wall spell. It formed 2 hemispherical barriers and covered the 2 of them. Evil cultivators usually had strong spiritual energy. Without first using the soul-extinguishing bell, he didn't dare to use the soul-splitting blade. The soul-extinguishing bell couldn't be leaked. Otherwise, if Qi Yun's old rival Chen Ji found out, he would be hunted down by a Zifu realm cultivator. With 2 layers of barriers, the sound couldn't travel far. The soul-extinguishing bell appeared beside him. As the bell rang, Bai Sheng frothed at the mouth. Wang Daoyuan immediately dispersed the quagmire spell to prevent his clone from being corroded. Then, he used the soul-splitting blade to attack Bai Sheng's soul. Bai Sheng was severely injured by the soul-extinguishing bell. He couldn't resist at all and was scattered. Wang Daoyuan took out the clone Zhao Baoguo's soul from the space of the spiritual pearl and injected it into Bai Sheng's sea of consciousness. The value of the clone Zhao Baoguo was that he was a penta-spirit root cultivator and could be used as a test subject to improve spells. Now that he had a foundation establishment stage test subject, it didn't make much sense for him to be a Qi refinement stage cultivator. 3 of the original 4 Qi refinement clones were replaced with foundation establishment stage cultivators. Only the clone Liang Zixing was left. Liang Zixing used to learn alchemy. After Wang Daoyuan became a rank 2 alchemist, he didn't care about his alchemy skills. Later on, he had been developing dishes. It was easier for fire attribute cultivators to control the fire. The dishes that Wang Daoyuan thought of in his previous life were slowly explored and restored by him. The clone Liang Zixing made a huge contribution to the business of the Wang family restaurant. He was still useful, so he was kept for the time being. The other Qi refinement clones wouldn't die after their souls were extracted. It was just that they were muddle-headed. They couldn't think about things like cultivation. With a little training, they could still do simple work like raising spirit beasts. Wang Daoyuan continued to keep them in the space and didn't directly eliminate them. Chapter 229. The 3 of them had been fighting on this mountain for quite some time and caused quite a commotion. There was a high chance that they would attract treasure hunting cultivators and they could not stay here any longer. Wang Daoyuan took away Du Heng's storage bag and dermic weapon. He used earth attribute spirit energy to erode the corpse and cleaned up all traces of the fight. Thereafter, he left the mountain peak. After dealing with the 2 evil cultivators, Wang Daoyuan could not help but lament, "I thought that treasure hunting cultivators would be the fastest way to earn spirit stones. To think that it would be even faster to do evil against evil." He had truly profited from dealing with Bai Sheng and Du Heng. In comparison, Du Heng was relatively poor and only had 5,000 to 6,000 spirit stones and a few jade scrolls in his storage bag. The cultivation technique he cultivated was called the malevolent Yin art. During cultivation, one would have to absorb Yin Qi and malevolent Qi. There was no lack of those things in the mystic Yin River. If it was anywhere else, one could only rely on killing cultivators or mortals to collect Yin Qi and malevolent Qi. That cultivation technique could only be cultivated to the peak of foundation establishment and was considered a relatively low-level evil cultivation technique. Most of his dermic arts were used in conjunction with Yin Qi and malevolent Qi and were of no value to Wang Daoyuan. The only valuable jade scroll recorded a secret skill, the Yin gathering and malevolent attracting technique. That secret skill recorded the method to collect, store and use Yin Qi and malevolent Qi. Wang Daoyuan was going to collect pure Yin Qi and could use that secret skill. As for Du Heng's black banner, it was called the Tiger Soul Malevolent Banner. When refining that banner, the soul of a tiger-type demon beast was fused with it. Normally, Yin Qi and malevolent Qi were used to nourish the tiger soul. The stronger the tiger soul, the stronger the Tiger Soul Malevolent Banner. The grade of such dermic weapons had nothing to do with the materials used, it mainly depended on the strength of the tiger soul. As long as the materials could withstand the power of the tiger soul, they could be used to refine dermic weapons. The mystic Yin River was where evil cultivators gathered. Everyone had the mentality of being on the side of the same faction. If he were to run into a group of evil cultivators as a righteous cultivator, he might be surrounded and attacked. Wang Daoyuan decided to use the Tiger Soul Malevolent Banner as a cover to pretend to be an evil cultivator. Heretical cultivators had all kinds of strange Dharma artifacts, and there were all kinds of them. However, most of them were either banners or flags. For example, Elder Zhou Qi of the Netherworld sect used a large black flag as his magic tool. Wang Daoyuan's use of the Tiger Soul Yin Fiend banner was not conspicuous. Du Heng didn't have much money, but Bai Sheng was filthy rich. His split soul peeked into his memories and found out that this fellow had been doing the shady business of seizing treasures since he was in the middle stage of Qi refinement. In the beginning, he followed a few cultivators at the peak of Qi refinement and relied on the leftovers to cultivate. After more than 20 years, he only reached the 7th level of Qi refinement when he was 50 years old. Later on, he poisoned the other cultivators in the same group and took all the wealth that the group had accumulated over the years. He obtained a lot of pills, talismans, and artifacts, which were worth 20,000 to 30,000 spirit stones. He sold all the things he didn't need and exchanged them for spirit stones to buy pills that could increase his cultivation. It took him several years to raise his cultivation to the 9th level of qi refinement. Later on, he traveled around in search of opportunities. Finally, he found a place where a fiendish cultivator had passed away and obtained the fiendish cultivator's inheritance. The two most important things in this inheritance were the 5 elements blood demon technique and the 3rd grade superior grade artifact refinement inheritance that could refine heretical dharma artifacts. The 5 elements blood demon technique could be cultivated to the peak of the purple mansion realm. It was an extremely brilliant heretical cultivation technique. Using the blood and true essence of humans and demon beasts to cultivate the technique could make up for the slow cultivation speed of cultivators with 5 spirit roots. Beiyuan relied on this method to quickly increase his cultivation. With the powerful evil path cultivation method and evil path dharma artifacts, his fighting prowess had greatly increased. It would be much easier for him to snatch treasures. Soon, he accumulated a large amount of spirit stones and successfully bought a foundation establishment pill, successfully reaching the foundation establishment realm. After reaching the foundation establishment realm, he refined the 9 spirits white bone wheel according to the heretical dharma artifact refinement inheritance. Since then, he rarely had a match among his peers. Now, he was more than 130 years old and had been seizing treasures for more than 100 years. The 9 spirits white bone wheel was made from the bones of cultivators. If it was damaged, it could be repaired with the bones of demon beasts or cultivators. Using the artifact refinement method, it could refine the essence of the artifact and repair any damage. Normally, it could be nourished with the blood of demon beasts or cultivators to increase its power. The 9 skeletons of the 9 spirits white bone wheel had the ability to store spiritual energy. Inside each skeleton, there was a special artifact pattern inscribed on it. This artifact pattern was similar to the runes of the spiritual talisman Dao. However, during the process of inscribing the runes, both spiritual energy and spiritual sense were required. However, the artifact pattern didn't have this requirement. It only needed to be able to display a certain function under the activation of spiritual energy. Under the activation of spiritual energy, the artifact pattern could release spells. The spiritual energy required to activate the artifact pattern could be stored in advance or injected into the artifact during battle. Wang Daoyuan naturally wouldn't refine a heretical dharma artifact, but this artifact refinement method could be used as a reference. Artifacts that could release spells were generally referred to as auxiliary artifacts in the orthodox dharma artifact refinement method. Grade 1 and Grade 2 offensive and defensive dharma artifacts such as sabers, swords, shields and armors generally didn't have any spells. They only had some simple functions similar to spells. Rank 1 and 2 support-type magic tools usually only had 1 or 2 types of spells. Offensive and defensive dharma artifacts needed to clash with other dharma artifacts. The most important thing was their strength and not their special functions. Auxiliary artifacts didn't need to clash head-on with other dharma artifacts. They focused on special functions and had much lower requirements for the strength of the materials. The 9 spirits white bone wheel was more perverted. Not only could it be used for offense and defense like a flying sword, but it could also be used as an auxiliary artifact. It could also release spells like an auxiliary magic tool. Moreover, it could release spells of 9 different attributes. This kind of multi-purpose dharma artifact was very suitable for Wang Daoyuan, who was a cultivator of all 5 attributes. Although the heretical dharma artifacts wouldn't have an advantage against the orthodox dharma artifacts in battle. However, in terms of ingenuity, the heretical dharma artifacts were much better than the orthodox dharma artifacts. In the future, when he learned how to refine artifacts, he could use this idea to achieve the effect of multi-purpose artifacts. This was especially true for large-scale dharma artifacts such as flying boats. There was enough space to add various functions. Beiyuan had been a treasure-hunting cultivator for so many years. Apart from the heretical inheritance, there were many other things. In his storage bag, there were more than 100,000 spirit stones. In addition, there were 4 or 5 heretical dharma artifacts and more than 10 jade slips. What was recorded in these jade slips were also evil Dao techniques. Including the spells of the 4 attributes used in battle, they were all mixed with Yin Qi, evil Qi, and so on. Orthodox cultivators couldn't use them at all. Even if he didn't use these Dharma artifacts and spells, he could exchange them for spirit stones. From Baixing's memories, he knew that the source of the Xianing River was especially rich with Yin Qi and evil Qi. A large group of heretical cultivators had gathered there to cultivate. Where there were people, there would naturally be business. A few Peak Foundation establishment heretical cultivators took the lead and established a small market called the Xianing Market. There, one could buy all kinds of spiritual items, including demon beasts that the Guiyan market didn't dare to sell. Orthodox cultivators were afraid of demon beasts taking revenge, but heretical cultivators didn't care. Heretical cultivators had too many tricks up their sleeves. Any of their Dharma spells had additional damage, attacks on the soul, corrosion, poison, and so on. It was easy to deal with demon beasts that were simple-minded and single-minded. Apart from mutants like the Thunder Ape, other demon beasts didn't dare to go against heretical cultivators. Baixing's clone had a deep understanding of heretical cultivators. With his memories, it was much easier for Wang Daoyuan to blend in with the heretical cultivators. Apart from that, he could also learn weapon refinement and accumulate experience for himself. Baixing's weapon refinement inheritance was from heretical cultivators. If he were to refine orthodox Dharma artifacts, he might not be able to unleash his original standards. However, they were both on the path of weapon refinement and would reach the same goal. He had the attainments of a middle-grade rank 2 weapon refinement master. If he switched to orthodox Dharma artifacts, his speed of improvement would be much faster than a layman. Chapter 230. To disguise as an evil cultivator, one had to look like one. Without an evil cultivator's magic weapon, one could not deceive others. From Baixing's memory, he knew that he was famous among the evil cultivators, and the 9 spirits white bone wheel was also famous. If Wang Daoyuan took out the 9 spirits white bone wheel, it would be telling others that he killed Baixing. It would be too conspicuous, so it was better to use the flag-type magic weapon common among evil cultivators. In the fight between Du Heng and Baixing, the evil spirit in the tiger spirit banner was basically exhausted. There was only a thin layer of evil spirit left on the banner, which looked light gray. The tiger spirit in the banner was also badly damaged and extremely weak. It needed to collect evil spirit and recuperate to restore its original strength. The evil cultivator's cultivation method was easy to solve. His earth attribute spiritual power had the effect of eroding everything with the dust-returning flame. When he used earth attribute magic, the killing effect was very similar to that of evil cultivators. As for activating the tiger spirit banner, it needed spiritual power and evil spirit. Any attribute of spiritual power could be used. As long as enough evil spirit was stored in the banner in advance, it could be activated with spiritual power. Although the Yin gathering evil attracting skill was a secret skill, it was actually a way to control evil spirit. It was very simple. It was just that to store evil spirit, it needed a special magic weapon. It was not difficult to refine a magic weapon that could store evil spirit. Baixing was an expert in this field. He could find a few materials with evil spirit and refine them into a spatial magic weapon that could store evil spirit. Wang Daoyuan did not have such a thing, but Du Heng had a mysterious Yin jade gourd with a space of 10 square feet. The inside of the mysterious Yin jade gourd was empty, and there was no evil spirit. He wanted to collect pure evil spirit and cultivate the inky jade lotus, so he also needed such a magic weapon. Moreover, he wanted to cultivate the inky jade lotus for a long time, so he needed pure evil spirit. Only one mysterious Yin gourd was not enough. However, when he arrived at the mysterious Yin market, there were many materials suitable for refining such magic weapons, and they were not very precious. He could buy more materials and let Baixing refine them in the space. Although Baixing's original intelligence and consciousness were destroyed, he was after all a second-rank middle-grade weapon refiner. After the split soul entered the main body, it would have the memories of the past as well as the remnant memories of the body. Even if he couldn't display the strength of a second-tier middle-grade magic tool, there was still hope for him to refine a second-tier low-grade magic tool. Refining a first-tier magic tool like the Profound Een Jade Gourd was not a problem at all. In order to disguise his identity, Wang Daoyuan had made the Tiger Soul Een Fiend banner recognize him as its master. Sword Kinesis Flight was also a type of magic tool Kinesis Flight. The content of Sword Kinesis Flight in the art of Sword Kinesis Flight could also be used to drive other magic tools. With the Tiger Soul Een banner flying faster than sword flight, he soon arrived at Hell Valley's former location. The high mountains on both sides of the canyon had also become low mountain ranges. These hills were oriented in a north-south direction, and between the two mountain ranges was a narrow plain. The main stream and all the tributaries of the Xian Een River originated from the small mountain ranges on both sides of the river. They flowed through the central plain and flowed northward. The source of the Xian Een River was called the Xian Een Spring. It was located in the middle of a small mountain range in the east. The water in the Profound Een Spring was plentiful, forming a pool with an area of more than 2 acres around the spring. This pool of water was the place with the densest Een Qi in the Xian Een River basin. Een Qi was also a type of spiritual Qi. According to its density, the Xian Een Spring was a mid-grade third-grade spirit spring. Wang Daoyuan learned from Bai Xing's memories that there were rules around the Xian Een Spring. The Een Qi around the spring was far denser than the river outside. Only peak and late foundation establishment cultivators were allowed to occupy this area. Those below late foundation establishment had to show their skills if they wanted to occupy a spot around the Xian Een Spring. If they could beat a late foundation establishment cultivator, then no one would say anything. Mid-foundation establishment cultivators could occupy the river near the spring. Early foundation establishment cultivators could only occupy the river downstream, 100 zhang away from the spring. Bai Xing, with his mid-foundation establishment cultivation, occupied the area around the Xian Een Spring. If Wang Daoyuan used the Earth Divine Thunder, it wouldn't be a problem for him to defeat a foundation establishment level 7 heretical cultivator. But he was pretending to be a demonic cultivator and couldn't use Earth Divine Lightning. He could only rely on ordinary Earth Elemental spells and the Tiger Soul Dark Banner. It wouldn't be difficult to deal with demonic cultivators of the same level, but he was no match for a 7th layer foundation establishment cultivator. Anyway, he was only here to scout the area and see if he could collect pure Een Qi to nourish the Tiger Soul Dark Banner. As a 3rd layer foundation establishment cultivator, Wang Daoyuan was naturally at the front of the river section occupied by early foundation establishment cultivators. He walked to 100 zhang away from the Xian Een Spring and sat cross-legged by the river bank. He used the Een Qi to gather Een Qi from the river. Then, he injected the Een Qi into the Tiger Soul Dark Banner and used the secret technique of nourishing the Tiger Soul to heal its injuries. The Tiger Soul was equivalent to the weapon spirit of the Tiger Soul Dark Banner. Of course, it wasn't a true weapon spirit, but it had the same function. If the Tiger Soul was strong, the weapon would be strong. If the Tiger Soul was heavily injured, the weapon's power would be greatly reduced. He sat cross-legged at the best spot for early foundation establishment cultivators. Because he was a 3rd layer foundation establishment cultivator, the other early foundation establishment cultivators didn't dare to say anything. After a while, 2 more 3rd layer foundation establishment cultivators arrived. The 2 of them weren't from the same group. They came from different places. One of them had a similar cultivation as Wang Daoyuan. They were both at the 3rd layer foundation establishment and had already consolidated their cultivation. However, they were still quite a distance away from the 4th layer. After he arrived at the river bank, he sat on the opposite bank of Wang Daoyuan. The river made a turn here. The river flowed slowly where Wang Daoyuan was, making it easier to extract Een Qi. However, the river flowed faster on the opposite bank, making it harder to extract Een Qi. Although the other person was also at the 3rd layer foundation establishment, he could break through to the 4th layer at any time. This person was covered in yin qi and held a bone sword stained with blood. As the person with the highest cultivation among early Foundation establishment cultivators, he didn't have the confidence to challenge a mid-Foundation establishment cultivator. Therefore, he targeted Wang Daoyuan. He looked at the tiger-souled dark banner in Wang Daoyuan's hand. It seemed to be heavily injured and couldn't unleash much power. He stepped forward and provoked, "Brat, this spot should be mine. If you know what's good for you, move away quickly. Don't make me attack." Heretic cultivators were arrogant people. If they were too cowardly, they would be despised. If Wang Daoyuan wanted to pretend to be a heretic cultivator, he might as well pretend to be all the way. He had to show his arrogance. He couldn't be bothered with this heretic cultivator and replied, "Scram." The sword-wielding heretic cultivator was a little embarrassed. He waved his hand and the long sword in his hand went straight for Wang Daoyuan. Wang Daoyuan used the earth armor technique and prepared to take the sword head-on. Of course, he wouldn't take the beating for nothing. He immediately used the meteor fall technique and condensed a flaming meteorite in his hand. The bone sword slashed the earth armor technique, but it only made the earth armor technique shake a little. On the other hand, the sword-wielding heretic cultivator was forced to take a few steps back. He wanted to attack again, but Wang Daoyuan had already prepared the flaming meteorite in his hand. He threw the meteorite at the sword-wielding heretic cultivator. This flaming meteorite flew very fast. Without a high-level escape technique or a late Foundation establishment cultivator, there was no way to dodge it. Seeing that it was too late to dodge, the sword-wielding heretic cultivator could only block it with his sword. With a bang, the flaming meteorite hit the bone sword. The sword-wielding heretic cultivator took the attack head-on and was forced to retreat more than 3 meters. He even spat out a mouthful of blood. The bone sword in his hand was also damaged. A horizontal crack appeared on the sword's spine. If it received another heavy blow, the sword's body might break along the crack. Not only that, the earth attribute spiritual energy on the sword was constantly corroding the bone sword, making a sizzling sound. The sword-wielding heretic cultivator immediately injected spiritual energy into the sword to disperse Wang Daoyuan's earth attribute spiritual energy. The surrounding cultivators all looked at Wang Daoyuan strangely. Wang Daoyuan didn't know what was going on. He continued to absorb the yin qi. Chapter 231. A cultivator at the 5th level of Foundation building next to him murmured, "What a powerful cultivation method. It can hide the evil yin qi so well. It's so corrosive, but I can't feel any fluctuation other than the spiritual power of earth." The evil cultivator with the sword still wanted to attack, but a cultivator at the 7th level of Foundation building next to the spring reprimanded him, "Get out of the way if you lose. If you don't stop, you'll be punished severely." The evil cultivator with the sword didn't dare to attack again. He glared at Wang Daoyuan and walked downstream angrily. Wang Daoyuan cupped his hands to express his gratitude to the cultivator at the 7th level of Foundation building. The cultivator nodded and didn't say anything. Wang Daoyuan was about to continue extracting the evil yin qi when the rogue cultivator at the 3rd level of Foundation building sitting opposite him sent a voice transmission to him, "Dao Yu is so capable. I'm Su Ting. I want to make friends with Dao Yu. May I know your name?" Wang Daoyuan laughed in his heart. The evil cultivators were really like this. The more arrogant and strong they were, the more other evil cultivators would think highly of them. He replied with a voice transmission, "I'm Zhou Ming." Su Ting continued to ask, "Dao Yu is very powerful. Can we go hunting in Mount Huiyan together in the future?" In the Shanbei area, demonic beasts were far more powerful than humans. Perhaps only people in this area dared to go hunting in the mountains. Wang Daoyuan replied, "No problem." Then he continued to extract the evil yin qi from the river. This place was still too far away from the spring. It took him half a month to fill the tiger soul banner with the evil yin qi. The tiger soul in the banner was too seriously injured and couldn't be recovered in a short time. It needed time to be nurtured slowly. He spent a few more days to fill the mysterious Yin jade gourd with the evil Yin qi. It was useless to stay here any longer. To store more evil Yin qi, he needed more storage magic tools. He could only go to the mysterious Yin market to buy materials and refine magic tools that could store the evil Yin qi. The mysterious Yin market was more than 20 miles north of the mysterious Yin spring. It was built on a large spiritual vein of the third level. This spirit vein was a non-elemental spirit vein and was more suitable for human cultivators to live in. Although evil cultivators could not leave the vile qi during their cultivation, their bodies would be injured by the vile qi. Heretical cultivators who relied on the baleful Yin qi to cultivate usually did not live to the end of their lifespans. There were plenty of Righteous Path Foundation establishment cultivators who had lived up to 230 years old. As for Foundation establishment cultivators among the heretical cultivators, it was rare for them to live to 200 years old. Other than that, none of the evil cultivators of the baleful Yin lineage walked the path of body refinement. This was because the spiritual energy in the body contained Yin qi, and the vital essence condensed from spiritual energy would also carry Yin qi. In the process of strengthening the body, the baleful Yin qi would also damage the body. Evil cultivators of the baleful Yin lineage had far weaker physical bodies than orthodox cultivators of the same cultivation level. The advantage of the baleful Yin lineage was that their spells were more lethal to the human body. Moreover, the evil cultivation method did not have high requirements for the cultivator's aptitude. For example, Bai Sheng, a penta-spirit root cultivator, had cultivated to the 6th level of the Foundation Establishment realm at the age of 130 and could break through to the 7th level of the Foundation Establishment realm at any time. His cultivation speed was comparable to a cultivator with 3 spirit roots. Bai Sheng's cultivation method did not belong to the baleful Yin lineage either. He relied on the essence blood of demon beasts and cultivators to cultivate. Not only would it not cause damage to the body, it would even strengthen it. This type of cultivation method made the body stronger than that of righteous path cultivators. Of course, this was not without a price. Apart from vital essence, the essence blood also contained resentment and a small amount of baleful Yin qi. Cultivating with the essence blood of demon beasts and cultivators could easily affect one's mind and eventually turn into a human-shaped demon beast that only knew how to kill. Even those with strong wills would not be affected. However, when breaking through a major realm, it was almost impossible to avoid being disturbed by mental demons, and it was easy to die from them. Because the spirit energy of evil cultivators was mixed with things that were harmful to the body, even though it increased the lethality of their spells, they had to pay a huge price. That was why they were curious when they saw that Wang Daoyuan's spirit energy did not contain any trace of baleful Yin qi. Without baleful Yin qi, it meant that it would not harm the body. Not only could it ensure that the spirit energy had additional lethality, it would not harm the body or affect one's lifespan. This was extremely attractive to all evil cultivators. Wang Daoyuan had Bai Sheng's memories and naturally knew about these things, but he did not care. Although the evil cultivators were envious of this cultivation method, cultivators in the late and peak stages of Foundation establishment would most likely not fight for it. Cultivators in the late and peak stages of Foundation establishment were not young anymore. They were still hoping to take a gamble and open up their purple mansion to extend their lifespan. Now that they had switched to a different cultivation method, it would be difficult for them to recover their current cultivation level without 10 or 20 years. They did not have much lifespan left, so who would dare to waste another 10 or 20 years? Moreover, they did not know what Wang Daoyuan's cultivation method was. If it was just for show and did not contain any baleful Yin qi on the surface, it would still harm the body and it would be a waste of effort. Therefore, those who were interested in Wang Daoyuan's cultivation method were only in the early and middle stages of Foundation establishment. These evil cultivators would not make a move openly. The Mystic Yin Spring allowed competition, but not a fight to the death, so as not to affect other people's cultivation. The Mystic Yin market did not allow fights at all. There was only a distance of 20 miles between the market and the Mystic Yin Spring. Once a fight to the death, it would affect both the market and the Mystic Yin Spring. Therefore, Fights to the death were not allowed from the Mystic Een Spring to the Mystic Een Market. Even if these evil cultivators wanted to make a move, they would only wait for him to go out and take the opportunity to sneak up on him. After collecting the Mystic Een Chi, Wang Daoyuan drove the Tiger Spirit Een Chi banner to the Mystic Een Market. The Mystic Een Market covered a large area and the shops were scattered. 500 to 600 shops took up a dozen miles long and 3 to 4 miles wide. Each shop was very spacious. Wang Daoyuan came to the largest shop in the market, the 100 Arts Pavilion. It was said that anything related to elixirs, weapons, and talisman arrays could be bought in the 100 Arts Pavilion. It was very convenient for him to find refining materials with Een Chi here. The 100 Arts Pavilion was co-founded by the founder of the Mystic Een Market. The Mystic Een Market had been established for more than 200 years. The founder of that year had already been buried. The current owners of the Mystic Een Market were all their descendants. The biggest shareholder of the 100 Arts Pavilion was surnamed Zhao. The Zhao family was causing trouble everywhere. Wang Daoyuan suspected that they were from the Zhao family whenever he saw someone surnamed Zhao. However, it was really hard to say. Although the Mystic Een Market was very far from the Guiyan Market, there was no natural moat between the two places. There were also no big forces interfering. It wasn't impossible for the Zhao family to intervene here. It was not surprising that they could use the Guiyuan sword sect to make use of the evil cultivators here. After all, the evil cultivators had many sinister means. When many cultivators gathered together to fight, their fighting power was stronger. Recruiting evil cultivators was much better than recruiting sword cultivators who were only good at fighting alone. Of course, the founder's surname might just be Zhao by coincidence. The Zhao family was not the only family with the surname Zhao. Zhao Baoguo was also surnamed Zhao. From his memory, there was no connection with the Zhao family. Wang Daoyuan walked into the 100 Arts Pavilion to look for refining materials. The 100 Arts Pavilion did business with all kinds of materials. Whether they were used by evil cultivators or not, they would be sold here. It was just that the materials used by evil cultivators were expensive, while the materials used by righteous cultivators were cheap. His target was materials with Een Chi. This kind of thing was not rare here. Especially the Mystic Een Jade, it was especially cheap. The Mystic Een Jade was a specialty of the Mystic Een River Basin. It was possible to find a few pieces by strolling around the Mystic Een River. The strength of the Mystic Een Jade was very poor. Other than refining a magic tool to store Een Chi, it was not very useful. The first stage was more than 10 spirit stones per kilogram. The second stage was less than 100 spirit stones per kilogram. This price was nothing for a foundation establishment cultivator. Wang Daoyuan bought more than 50 kilograms of the second stage Mystic Een Jade and spent more than 2,000 spirit stones. After buying the Mystic Een Jade, he was about to look at other things when he met Su Ting. Chapter 232. Su Ting stepped forward and cupped his hands. What a coincidence, Zhou Daoyu is also here. He didn't give off the feeling of a heretic cultivator, but more like a righteous cultivator. Normally, evil cultivators would be surrounded by Een Chi, and their entire being would be lifeless. And these people were injured by the Een Chi, so they were more or less reclusive and ruthless. And the spirit power fluctuation on Su Ting's body also carried a trace of Een Chi, but it gave off a very cheerful feeling. If he was really a kind person, the possibility of surviving in this place was not high. This Su Ting was very likely a smiling tiger. Then this kid was trying to worm his way into being friends with him. It was very likely that he was interested in his cultivation method. Wang Daoyuan smiled and said, "I'm just here to buy some materials." Su Daoyu is also here to buy materials. Su Ting also answered, "No, I'm here to buy a refining inheritance. Cultivation is difficult, and I can only rely on hunting and gathering. I don't have enough resources, so I want to learn refining." The 100 Arts Pavilion did have pill refining, and talisman array inheritances for sale, but at most, it was second-tier upper grade. It was already useless to Wang Daoyuan. Wang Daoyuan cupped his hands and said, "Then Dao Yu can go ahead. I'll go find some other materials. Goodbye." Su Ting nodded and walked into the 100 Arts Pavilion. Wang Daoyuan looked at a few refining materials, but they were all bones and so on. He was really not interested. After walking around, he left the 100 Arts Pavilion. Next, he had to find a place to stay. Because the plan to obtain pure Yin Qi had to be postponed, he still needed to stay in the profound Yin market for a while. He originally thought that he could easily obtain pure Yin Qi in the profound Yin spring. As long as he forged a few more artifacts to store Yin Qi and stored enough Yin Qi, he could make the inky jade lotus bloom and bear seeds. Unfortunately, things did not go as he wished. The Yin Qi gushing out of the profound Yin spring was not pure, but mixed with a large amount of Yin Qi. He let his clone try to use the extracted Yin Qi to cultivate the inky jade lotus. The inky jade lotus grew a flower bud, but it withered very quickly. The place where the Yin Qi was extracted was only 100 feet away from the profound Yin spring, and there was no water from other places in the middle. Therefore, the profound Yin spring did not produce pure Yin Qi in the first place. The baleful Yin Qi was formed by a mixture of Yin Qi and baleful Qi. Since the two were fused together, it was impossible to separate them using normal methods. The evil cultivators' techniques had always been about adding evil Qi, Yin Qi, and other things to their spiritual power. They had never considered how to obtain pure Yin Qi. If he wanted to obtain pure Yin Qi, he would have to think of other ways. According to 5 Element Sages' records in Beiyuan, Hell Valley was 1,000 zhang deep. More than 50,000 feet below the bottom of the valley, there was the Gui water nether spring that was gushing with pure Yin Qi. He had personally gone to the place where the Gui water nether spring was located to observe and record that the density of the Gui water nether spring's Yin Qi was comparable to a rank 5 spirit vein and spirit eye. The spring water in the Gui water nether spring flowed from the north and south. The northern stream formed Hell Valley, while the southern stream formed an underground river that flowed south through Wild Goose Mountain. After the underground river passed through many obstacles and flowed out of the ground, it became the Mingshui River. In the territory of the Underworld sect, the Underworld River was very famous. The Underworld sect's mountain gate was on the banks of the Mingshui River. The Mingshui River's water contained dense Yin Qi. The Underworld sect relied on the Mingshui River's Yin Qi to become one of the 3 great sects of the Zhao Empire. The Mingshui River's Yin Qi was much purer than the profound Yin springs. Although it wasn't pure Yin Qi, it was still stronger than the profound Yin River's evil Qi. Using it to feed the inky jade lotus shouldn't be a problem. A pity that the Mingshui River's Yin Qi was sucked away by the Underworld sect's array and used for their disciples' cultivation. After flowing past the Underworld sect's mountain gate, there wasn't much Yin Qi left in the Mingshui River. The chances of getting Yin Qi from the Mingshui River weren't high. 5 Element Sage was from tens of thousands of years ago, so the Gui water nether spring's Yin Qi should be far weaker than before. But since the profound Yin River's Yin Qi was still so strong, the Gui water nether spring should still be there. The Gui water nether spring was more than 50,000 feet below Hell Valley. Hell Valley was now a flat plain. The Gui water nether spring was more than 60,000 feet below ground. At this depth, even a golden core cultivator wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure of the earth. He was only a foundation establishment cultivator, so even if he used the earth escape art, he would only be able to go 400 to 500 feet below ground. Any deeper and his body wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure of the earth. In the past, 5 Element Sage didn't use the earth escape art to go down. He wanted to find the source of the Yin Qi, so he went through the underground rivers and underground caves. He didn't know how many times he tried before he found the correct route to the Gui water nether spring. Unfortunately, the Beiyuan records didn't record his route back then. Even if it was recorded, it wouldn't be of much use. After all, tens of thousands of years had passed and the route back then was likely broken. But 5 Element Sage's method provided him with a reference. He could also use 5-element sage's method to go to the Gui water nether spring. Finding the underground rivers and caves wasn't hard. In the cultivation world, finding mines, spirit veins, underground rivers, and other methods was an array master's specialty. Wang Daoyuan was a second-tier upper-grade array master, so it wasn't particularly difficult for him to find the underground rivers and caves. The main difficulty was to find a suitable passage. Going straight down the water was no different from courting death. If the earth escape art was too deep, the body would be under a lot of pressure, and the same was true for the water escape art. It was just that the pressure on the water escape art was a bit higher. In Wang Daoyuan's case, the depth of the water escape art couldn't exceed 150 feet. If he didn't want to be crushed to death by the water or the earth, he had to arrange the route. In addition to the route, there was also the problem of the yin qi. When he entered the cold water river, he was frozen by the yin qi in the river. The place near the Gui water nether spring was even colder. In the Beiyuan records, it was also recorded that the surroundings of the Gui water nether spring were extremely cold. Even 5-element sage, a Jindan cultivator, could feel a trace of coldness. He also had to prepare magic tools that could resist the cold. Otherwise, even if he successfully found the Gui water nether spring, he might be frozen to death. These weren't things that could be done overnight. He might need to stay here for a few years, or even longer, before he could solve the problem of the route and cold resistance. If it was just to find the pure yin qi, there was actually no need to go to the location of the Gui water nether spring. He just needed to find the north and south water veins of the spring. But in the Gui water nether spring, there might be a treasure that he urgently needed. That was the water attribute spiritual item needed to cultivate the 5-spirit immortal art. When 5-element sage explored the Gui water nether spring, it was to find a water attribute spiritual item to condense a water attribute spiritual power seed. When he found the Gui water nether spring, he didn't find a suitable spiritual item. Generally, after a long time, a spirit spring would condense a special water attribute spiritual item. But the Gui water nether spring was formed relatively late. When 5-element sage found it, it hadn't condensed a spiritual item. 5-element sage estimated that it would take at least 20,000 years to form a water attribute spiritual item in the Gui water nether spring. Now, 50 to 60,000 years had passed since 5-element sage's era. The spiritual item in the Gui water nether spring should have already taken shape. Gui water belonged to yin water, and the spring water was rich in yin qi. The place where the Gui water nether spring was located was extreme yin, and extreme yin gave birth to yang. According to 5-element sage's speculation, in the Gui water nether spring, there might be a water attribute spiritual fire. For the cultivator who cultivated the 5 elements immortal art, the 5 elements spiritual fire was the most precious treasure. With the hope of getting the water attribute spiritual fire, what was the point of spending some time? 10 to 20 years of time was still something they could afford. There was nothing for him to solve in the family for the time being. It would take a long time for the Zhao family to make trouble. At present, he still had plenty of time. He simply stayed in the Xianin market and planned the Gui water nether spring. Chapter 233. If he was only looking for pure yin qi, there was another option. That was the place Qi Yun had previously explored, the place where the 10,000 corpse Daoist had passed away. According to Qi Yun's memory, it was a secret realm with yin qi lingering inside, and there was also a lot of pure yin qi. However, Chen Ji knew that the place where spiritual corpse master died, and Qi Yun's old rival, Chen Ji, might have left something nearby. If he went there rashly, he might be discovered. At that time, he would be facing a Peak Foundation establishment cultivator or even a Zifu realm cultivator. With his current strength, he had no hope of winning against a righteous cultivator at the 7th level of the Foundation establishment realm. To deal with evil cultivators, he could rely on the restraining effect of the Earth Divine Thunder and barely fight. If he was facing a Peak Foundation establishment cultivator, the success rate of escaping was not high. If Chen Ji opened the Zifu realm, he would not even have a chance to escape. Although it was a little dangerous to look for the Gui water nether spring, it was all controllable. He could withdraw at any time and did not have to face a strong enemy. The matter of the Gui water nether spring could not be solved overnight. Now, he had to find a place to stay. There were not many shops in the Xianin market, but the area was very large, so there was a lot of space to open a cave residence. The entire Xianin market was built between mountains, and there were many cave residences near the mountains. These cave residences were owned by the higher-ups of the Xianin market, and rogue cultivators could buy or rent them. The center of the Xianin market was the management organization of the whole market. To rent a cave residence, one only needed to go to the center and choose a suitable one. The manager of the cave residence rental was an old peak chi refining cultivator. When Wang Daoyuan came here, the old cultivator asked respectfully, "Senior, the cave residences in the Xianin market can be rented or bought. Do you want to rent or buy a cave residence?" Wang Daoyuan replied, "Just rent one." The old cultivator persuaded, "Senior, the Xianin market is recruiting foundation establishment cultivators to form a defensive force called the Xianin Guard. There are 4 elixirs, weapons, and talisman arrays. If one of them can reach the 2nd level of lower grade, he can become a guest of the Xianin market. Whether he joins the Xianin Guard or becomes a guest, he can get a cave residence for free. Senior, do you have this intention?" He was just staying here temporarily and had no interest in these trivial matters. He replied, "I'm just staying in the Xianin market temporarily. I have other affairs to attend to in the future, so I can't stay for long." The old cultivator's face was filled with regret. Just as he was about to say something, he glanced outside and immediately cupped his hands. "Young master, you've arrived." Wang Daoyuan looked outside and saw a 7th-level foundation establishment cultivator in a white robe walking in. This person also looked like a young man, and Wang Daoyuan recognized him. The newcomer was none other than the 7th-level foundation establishment cultivator who had stopped the evil cultivator when they had first arrived at the profound Yin Spring. At that time, Wang Daoyuan only greeted him and did not look closely at his appearance. After all, they weren't familiar with each other, so it wasn't polite to stare at others. At this moment, he was so shocked by this face that he broke out in a cold sweat. It wasn't that this person's appearance was scary, it was just that this person's appearance was too familiar. Wang Daoyuan saw the shadows of 2 people on this person's face. They were Zhao Liang and Shi Xinghua. His appearance was somewhat similar to both Zhao Liang and Shi Xinghua, so he might be related to them by blood. This person's identity was obvious. He was a descendant of the 9th prince. This person walked into the room with steady footsteps. This time, Wang Daoyuan was even more certain of this person's identity. After all, the Wang family was once a noble family of the state of Zhao, so they knew quite a lot about the rules of the state of Zhao. At that time, the nobles and officials all walked with the official gait. Wandering cultivators and sect disciples were particular about being unrestrained, so they didn't walk like this. Wang Daoyuan was very surprised, but his expression didn't change. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Dao Yu, for helping me out at the profound Yin Spring. This one is Zhou Ming. May I know Dao Yu's name?" The person glanced at Wang Daoyuan and pondered for a moment before saying, "You're the fellow Daoist who cast a dermic art without a single trace of malevolent aura and was corrosive the other day. Even if I didn't say anything, that person was no match for you. He doesn't deserve this gratitude. My name is Zhao Qi. My father is the founder of the profound Yin market. Dao Yu's strength is extraordinary. Are you interested in joining the profound Yin Guard?" Sure enough, the people of the 9th prince's line were smarter. They were more secretive in their recruitment. Here, they could prepare 200 years in advance. Compared to the 6th prince's line, they were much better. Although the 9th prince's line was reliable, and the ancestor also followed the 9th prince to war, now was not the time to get involved in these things. He cupped his hands and said, "I'm used to being idle and don't like to be tied down. Please forgive me, young Master Zhao." Zhao Qi waved his hand and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. The Profound Een market recruits on a voluntary basis. Since Dao Yu doesn't want to, it's fine. Saying so, he turned to the old cultivator and said, "Give this fellow Dao Seeker Zhou a first-rate cave dwelling for free." The old cultivator nodded in agreement. Wang Daoyuan quickly refused. "I don't deserve it. I don't dare to accept such a big gift." Zhao Qi said with a smile, "Dao Yu and I hit it off. A mere cave residence is not a big gift. Dao Yu, I have something else to do. I won't keep you company." Then, without waiting for Wang Daoyuan's reply, he walked out of the house. The old cultivator took out a piece of animal skin. On the animal skin, the layout of the Profound Een market was drawn. He pointed to one of the cave residences and said, "Senior, what do you think of this cave residence?" The cave residence he pointed to was not far from the center of the market. It was not as noisy as the center of the market, nor was it deserted because of its remote location. Wang Daoyuan was also helpless. Zhao Qi had already left. It was useless to refuse a servant. He could only stay here for now. The ancestor of the Wang family killed 5 golden core cultivators for the Zhao family. He could be said to be the first hero in the war between the Zhao family and the 3 sections. In order to protect the Zhao family, many cultivators of the Wang family died in battle. It was nothing for Wang Daoyuan to take a cave residence for free. He nodded his head in agreement. The old cultivator handed him a token and said, "Senior, this is the token for the cave residence's array formation." Wang Daoyuan took the token and turned to leave the house, heading for the cave residence. Following the location on the map, he arrived at the entrance of the cave residence. The cave residence occupied a small hill and occupied more than 10 mu of land. On the west side of the hill, there was a grade 1 spirit spring with a few ornamental spirit fishes in the spring water. The entrance of the cave residence was on the east side of the hill and there were some precious ornamental spirit plants planted in front of the door. Using the token to close the cave residence's defensive array formation, he walked into the cave residence. He pushed open the door and entered the cave residence. The interior of the cave residence was not small, occupying about half a mu of land. The tables, chairs, stools, bookshelves, beds and so on were all made of grade 2 spirit wood. The teacups, teapots and other utensils were mostly made of grade 2 jade stones. The Zhao family had really put in a lot of effort to recruit talents. He checked the interior and exterior of the cave residence but did not find any eavesdropping or surveillance array formations. In the following days, Wang Daoyuan cultivated in the cave residence. To go out and search for underground rivers and caves, he would need a special dermic weapon, the spirit-seeking compass. This item was very similar to the formation measuring compass. In fact, it was a special kind of formation measuring compass. After the formation measuring compass was improved, its ability to find formation eyes and flaws was weaker. However, its ability to detect spirit veins and underground rivers was improved. The requirements for materials for this item were not high, but it had high requirements for weapon refinement skills. If one did not know about formations, they would not be able to create such an dermic weapon with just weapon refinement skills. However, Wang Daoyuan was proficient in formations and his clone Bai Sheng was proficient in weapon refinement. It was not a problem for them to create an inferior grade 2 spirit-seeking compass. Chapter 234. Wang Daoyuan had been cultivating in the cave for more than half a year. During this time, his cultivation had improved slightly. However, there was still some distance to go before he could break through to the 4th level of the Foundation Establishment realm. In the past half a year, Bai Sheng's clone had refined all the mystic Een jade into storage Dharma artifacts. He had refined more than 30 of them. In order to fool others, they were all in the shape of mystic Een jade gourds. He also often went to the mystic Een spring to collect Een Qi to nourish the Tiger Soul banner. After all, he still needed to use the Tiger Soul banner as a cover to search for underground rivers in the future. After half a year of nourishment, the Tiger Soul had completely recovered. The entire Dharma artifact had also regained its former power. Bai Xing's refining skills had also returned to second-level inferior grade, and he had successfully refined the spirit-seeking compass. This spirit-seeking compass was only the size of an adult's palm. It looked a bit like a compass, but it didn't have a pointer. The surface of the compass was also very simple, with only the carvings of the 5 elements divine beasts. After the spirit-seeking compass was activated, the 5 elements divine beast patterns could sense spirit chi of the corresponding attribute. There were 9 star positions in each divine beast pattern. If there was a spirit vein nearby, a star position would light up. If there was an inferior grade first-level spirit vein, only 1 star position would light up. If there was an intermediate grade first-level spirit vein, 2 would light up. If there was an upper grade third-level spirit vein, all 9 star positions would light up. After all, it was only an inferior grade second-level Dharma artifact. It couldn't determine the grade of a higher grade spirit vein. If the spirit-seeking compass was of a higher grade, it could add a few more star positions to determine a higher grade spirit vein. The entire spirit-seeking compass was divided into 2 layers. The upper layer could be rotated at will. If there was a water attribute spirit vein, the upper layer would rotate, and the black tortoise pattern would point in the direction of the spirit vein and release a beam of spirit chi toward the spirit vein. If there was a non-attribute spirit vein, the upper layer wouldn't rotate. The star positions in the 5 divine beast patterns would light up and release spirit chi beams at the same time. They would merge together and fly toward the spirit vein. This method only worked when there was a spirit vein. It was more passive. In addition to the passive method of searching for spirit veins, it could also directly control the chi testing compass to release spirit chi beams. Through the compass, the spirit chi beams could detect whether there were spirit veins in an area. Through the spirit chi beams, the spirit vein surroundings. This way, when searching for underground spirit veins, no one would need to go down personally. The spirit-seeking compass was a special kind of array measuring compass. It also retained the function of finding the array eye and the flaws of array formations. However, compared to the formation measuring disk, its effect was much weaker. The speed at which it could find the formation eye and the flaws of the formation was much slower than the formation measuring disk of the same grade. There were several hundred kilograms of soul-binding silk stored in the space, and it wasn't good to sell it. Since he didn't know how to refine weapons, he could only find a storage bag and put it inside. Now that he had a weapon refiner clone, he naturally had to make good use of it. Bai Xing used the soul-sealing silkworm silk to refine 2 low-grade Tier 2 cloaks. Although these cloaks were Tier 2 magic artifacts, they were not spirit armor-type magic artifacts. Its defensive function was about the same as a high-grade Tier 1 magic artifact. Its main function was to avoid the detection of divine sense. Back then, Blood Shadow assassin Wu Yi had ambushed him at Black Rock Peak. Wu Yi's cloak had only been refined with a few tails of soulbind silk. Even when Wang Daoyuan used the heaven-peering technique, he couldn't detect him from more than 10 feet away. Wang Daoyuan's 2 cloaks were both made with 3 layers of soulbind silk. They weighed about 4 to 5 kilograms without any other materials. A Zifu realm cultivator's soul had transformed into a divine soul, and the strength of their divine sense had greatly increased. It was hard to say whether this soulbind cloak could avoid the detection of a Zifu realm cultivator, but it was impossible for a Foundation establishment cultivator to detect it. He closed his eyes and used the heaven-peering technique. Even if the soulbind cloak was in front of him, he wouldn't be able to detect it. Even a peak Foundation establishment cultivator wouldn't be able to detect it if they didn't have an extremely powerful divine sense detection technique. When he went out, if he encountered a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator or a high-grade Tier 2 demon beast, he could just put on the soulbind cloak and use the earth escape technique. It would be very easy to escape. With everything ready, Wang Daoyuan left the cave and headed to the northern foot of Mount Huiyan to find the underground river. He changed into Du Heng's outfit, which was a loose black robe and a black cloak that could cover his head. Heretic cultivators cultivated with evil Yin Qi, which damaged their bodies. Usually, their faces were ugly. Therefore, most heretic cultivators didn't like to show their true faces. His clothes were also common among heretic cultivators, so it wouldn't attract attention. After leaving the Xianin market, he flew towards the south with the Tiger Soul banner. The Xianin market was only about 2,000 miles away from the northern foot of Mount Huiyan. It only took him a little more than 2 hours to reach the northern foot of Mount Huiyan. This time, his target was the Nine Springs Ridge. The Nine Springs Ridge was located at the northern edge of Mount Huiyan. 9 mountains were connected. On each mountain, there was a spiritual spring, which was why it was called the Nine Springs Ridge. Since there were so many spiritual springs here, there must be underground water veins. Moreover, the Nine Springs Ridge was located between the Xianin Spring and the Underworld sect. It shouldn't be far from the underground river upstream of the Darkwater River. He came to the middle mountain of the Nine Springs Ridge and took out the spirit-seeking compass. He was looking for the underground river, which could also be regarded as a water spiritual vein. He used his spiritual power to drive the black tortoise pattern on the spirit-seeking compass. The black tortoise pattern immediately spat out a beam of water spiritual power. Wang Daoyuan used the spirit-testing compass to control the direction of the beam of spiritual power. Under his control, the beam of spiritual power went into the underground water veins from the spiritual spring. The beam of spiritual power went down along the water veins. After 500 feet, it reached its limit. If it went any deeper, the beam of spiritual power would lose contact with the spirit-seeking compass. Without the spirit-seeking compass to continue supplying spiritual power, the beam of spiritual power would soon be annihilated. Moreover, the water veins under this spiritual spring were extremely narrow. The spring water was squeezed out from the cracks in the rocks. Cultivators couldn't pass through this kind of water veins. If this water vein didn't work, he would try another mountain. Just as he was about to leave the mountain, he heard someone calling for help at the foot of the mountain. He took a closer look and found that it was Su Ting. Behind Su Ting was a huge wild boar that was 60 to 70 feet long. This wild boar was at the beginning of the second rank, which was equivalent to a human cultivator at the 4th level of foundation establishment. Evil cultivators were natural enemies of demon beasts. Su Ting was at the 3rd level of foundation establishment. It shouldn't be a problem for him to beat a wild boar with a slightly higher cultivation. Besides, the wild boar was a terrestrial demon beast and couldn't fly. If he couldn't beat it, he could just fly away on his artifact. What was the meaning of racing with the wild boar on the ground? Wang Daoyuan couldn't be bothered to care about Su Ting's life or death. He had only seen him twice and exchanged a few words with him. Why would he care about him? Seeing Su Ting rush up, he immediately controlled the Tiger Soul in Fiend banner and was about to fly away. At this moment, a huge bird with a wingspan of more than 10 feet suddenly flew down from the sky. Its cultivation was at the 2nd rank, which was not far from the 2nd rank, which was equivalent to a cultivator at the 6th level of foundation establishment. Now he knew why Su Ting was racing with the wild boar. For Su Ting, with such a huge bird in the sky, flying on his artifact was not much different from suicide. It was safer to play with the wild boar. He wasn't very strong, but he was quite good at causing trouble. He was surrounded by 2 second-rank demon beasts in the air and on the ground. Compared to a second-rank demon beast, a foundation establishment cultivator's sword kinesis speed was far inferior. If he fought it head-on in the air, Wang Daoyuan wasn't confident that he could kill it even if he took out his trump card. On the lone mountain, he couldn't leave with earth escape. At most, he could escape to a depth of a few hundred feet. Surrounded by cliffs, he was even more passive than on the top of the mountain. Flying on artifacts and earth escape were both unreliable. The best choice was to kill or repel the wild boar and walk down the mountain. After reaching the surface, he could escape through earth escape. That huge bird couldn't do anything to him. Chapter 235. Wang Daoyuan held the Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner and leaped down the mountain. Soon, he met up with Su Ting. He wanted to go around the wild boar and run down the mountain. Su Ting shouted, "Dao Yu, save me," and jumped behind him. The wild boar crashed towards him. This kid wanted to divert the trouble. Wang Daoyuan really had the urge to kill him. If he chose to dodge, it would be a little difficult if he did not use the cloud mist escape. Unless it was a last resort, he could not expose his family's Dharma spells. Wang Daoyuan activated the Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner. The Dark Fiend Shi on the banner condensed into a black ball. The black ball quickly turned into a black tiger and pounced towards the wild boar. The black tiger formed by the Tiger Soul and the Dark Fiend Shi was much smaller than the wild boar. If he really fought the wild boar to the death, he would not be able to gain an advantage in a short time. However, relying on the corrosion of the Dark Fiend Shi, as long as the Dark Fiend Shi was not exhausted, the black tiger would definitely win over time. Wang Daoyuan was afraid that the wild boar would charge at him recklessly. He had already used the swift art and dodged to the side. When the wild boar saw the black tiger, it became timid before the battle and did not dare to charge forward. The black tiger pounced forward and started biting the wild boar. Su Ting also took out a flying sword. Wang Daoyuan thought that he was going to attack the wild boar. He did not expect that this kid's sword would attack him. At this moment, Wang Daoyuan had just landed. If he did not use the cloud mist escape, it would be impossible for him to dodge. Su Ting's Dharma weapon sword was of the metal attribute. The Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner in his hand relied entirely on the Tiger Soul. Now that the Tiger Soul was fighting with the wild boar, the Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner could not withstand a single blow. If it was used to block the flying sword, it would probably be crippled in one strike. Wang Daoyuan took out an inferior grade 2 white bone sword from the space. This was obtained from Bai Sheng. Moreover, this white bone sword was not forged by Bai Sheng himself. He had obtained it by killing someone and robbing it. This bone sword did not recognize an owner, so he could not use the sword control technique or borrow a sword to cast spells, so it could not exert much power. However, this was a second-grade low-grade offensive and defensive magic tool after all, and its strength wasn't low. It wasn't a problem to use it to forcefully receive Su Ting's flying sword. Su Ting's flying sword flew over. Holding the sword with one hand, he poured a large amount of spirit energy into the bone sword and slashed at the flying sword. The flying sword fell to the ground, and a gap appeared on the blade. There was also a sword mark on the bone sword. Wang Daoyuan did not take this bone sword seriously, and planned to sell it for spirit stones in the future. Su Ting's heart ached. His most commonly used flying sword was damaged, and he would have to spend a lot of spirit stones to repair it. Wang Daoyuan sneered and said, "You dare to be a treasure-seizing cultivator with such little ability." Before he could finish speaking, an arrogant voice rang out, "He's not qualified to be a treasure-seizing cultivator. You're not qualified either." Wang Daoyuan looked up and saw the ferocious bird in the sky flying over. As it got closer, Wang Daoyuan realized that there was a cultivator on the back of the bird, and his cultivation was at the 7th level of foundation establishment. This person was tall and strong, unlike other evil cultivators who looked like they were just a few more breaths than a dead person. This situation meant that this person's cultivation technique was extremely brilliant. He did not rely much on the evil aura, and his body was less eroded. This person also looked young, and he had the time to change his cultivation technique. It seemed that he had set his eyes on Lin Fan's cultivation technique. When the bird landed, Wang Daoyuan scanned it with his spirit consciousness and realized that it was a bone vulture. A bone vulture could grow to 2nd grade high grade at most. Unlike other vultures that ate rotten meat, this fellow liked to eat bones. The bone vulture was also a demon bird with an extremely strong physical body, and it was not trash like the black-feathered eagle. An adult bone vulture's feathers were like flying swords, and its bones were like metal. It had no problem withstanding the flying swords of cultivators of the same level. The young cultivator jumped down from the back of the bone vulture and smiled. "You're really capable. You hooked up with Zhao Qi as soon as you arrived, and I didn't dare to make a move against you in the market. Unfortunately, you recklessly left the market. You can't blame me for this. Wang Daoyuan's heart sank. This was a strong opponent. Even if he used all his means, he was not confident in defeating the person in front of him, not to mention that there was a bone vulture that was about to reach second-grade high-grade. As for the two trash like the wild boar and Su Ting, they were not in his consideration at all. He did not show it on his face and asked, Daoyu's cultivation technique is also extraordinary. Why do you have to spend so much effort to steal my cultivation technique? The young cultivator smiled. I naturally don't need it, but my subordinates do. Your cultivation technique has no evil aura, and the spells you use have corrosive properties. It's extremely attractive to rogue cultivators. If you use it as a signboard to attract rogue cultivators to join you and strengthen your strength, it's also very valuable. Wang Daoyuan thought that some people snatched the cultivation technique to cultivate themselves, and some people snatched it to sell it for money. But he did not expect that someone would snatch it as a signboard to attract rogue cultivators. He asked, so, Daoyu is also a powerful figure in the Xianin market? Is your surname also Zhao? The young cultivator replied, of course not. My surname is Wu. The Xianin market is not dominated by the Zhao family. My grandfather is also one of the founders of the market. Wang Daoyuan was a little confused about who this guy was. Among the top nobles of the Zhao state, the Wu family was indeed one of them. Moreover, the Wu family was the strongest family in Linchuan County. The Wu family of Linchuan was also an old noble family, but its power was not as powerful as that of the Shi family of Heiyang. It was only a marquis, but it occupied 1/3 of the territory of Linchuan County. Although he did not officially become Zhao Qi's subordinate, he accepted the cave residence given by Zhao Qi. In the eyes of outsiders, he was also Zhao Qi's subordinate. But if this guy was from the Wu family of Linchuan, he should not be against the Zhao family. It seemed that the upper class of the Xianin market was not all the ninth prince's men. This guy surnamed Wu should not be a member of the Wu family of Linchuan. His grandfather might just be a rogue cultivator who did not know the purpose of the Zhao family to establish the Xianin market, so he joined in the confusion. The identity of this person had nothing to do with him. If the Xianin market wanted to cause trouble, it would be a sneak attack on the mountain gate of the ghost sect, which would not affect the Wang family. The problem now was how to escape. Although the bone vulture was not good at speed, it was still faster than other second-rank demonic birds. No matter how slow a second-rank demonic bird was, it was still much faster than a foundation establishment cultivator riding on a sword. If he ran down the mountain and performed the earth-escaping skill and used the forbidden cloak, he might be able to escape. In the face of a 7th-level foundation establishment cultivator, it was meaningless to rely on evil means. He put away the Tiger Soul Dark Ghost banner and took out the golden edge sword he took from Li Qingxuan. In addition, he also took out more than 100 second-rank upper-grade talismans and stuck 5 earth armor talismans on himself. The cultivator surnamed Wu was unmoved, but Su Ting's eyes lit up when he saw his magic tools and talismans. Wang Daoyuan threw 5 fire python talismans to the cultivator surnamed Wu and the bone vulture. The 5 fire python talismans flew toward the man and the bird. The other 2 would not just stand there and watch. They immediately performed their best spells to attack him. Then, he performed the sand flying spell, covering the whole mountain in sand and dust. The cultivator surnamed Wu was a metal attribute cultivator, not a wind attribute cultivator, so it was impossible for him to break such a large range of flying sand in an instant. After breaking 2 fire python talismans with a flying sword, the cultivator surnamed Wu continued to attack Wang Daoyuan. Su Ting performed the golden saber technique, which was not powerful enough. The wild boar did not use any long-range attack magic, but just bumped into him. Wang Daoyuan was beaten up, but he did not dare to use the cloud escaping skill, fearing that his identity would be exposed. He could only use the 5 earth armor talismans to resist. The other party could not break through the 5 layers of earth armor talismans in an instant. After using the sand-flying spell, he immediately used the golden-edged sword to escape. The wild boar's charge missed. Su Ting's attack hit the second-rank upper-grade earth armor talisman, but it did not have much effect. However, the cultivator surnamed Wu's flying sword was very powerful. After breaking 2 fire python talismans, it hit his body and broke through a layer of earth armor talisman. Only then did the sword's power completely dissipate. Fortunately, the bone vulture did not have any long-range attack magic and was also held back by the 3 fire pythons, so it could not attack. Otherwise, Wang Daoyuan would be under even more pressure. Chapter 236. After several breaths of time, the bone vulture destroyed the 3 fire pythons and carried the cultivator surnamed Wu away from the range of the sand-flying technique. At this time, Wang Daoyuan had only escaped a little more than 100 feet away. For the bone vulture, this little distance was equivalent to the edge of its mouth. As long as it flapped its wings a few times, it would be able to catch up. Wang Daoyuan scattered more than 50 offensive talismans behind him and continued to escape without looking back. The bone vulture was speeding up and chasing after him. The distance of 200 feet was covered in an instant. Even if he saw the talismans, he wouldn't be able to dodge in time. He used his spiritual sense to detonate all the talismans. The cultivator surnamed Wu immediately ordered the bone vulture to turn around and dodge. He also controlled his flying sword to break the spell released by the talismans. The talismans had a very low hit rate when attacking flying targets. They couldn't be counted on to kill and could only act as a hindrance. The bone vulture flew high into the sky. Both the man and the vulture were unharmed. However, dodging the talismans wasted a lot of time. At this time, Wang Daoyuan had successfully reached the foot of the mountain. He put away his flying sword and landed in a place with lush vegetation. He took out a divine restriction cloak from the space and put it on. He immediately used the earth escape technique and escaped to a depth of 40 feet. Then, he immediately fled east along the foot of the mountain. Although the divine restriction cloak couldn't be detected, that was under the condition that he didn't use any spells. When he used the earth escape technique, it was inevitable that there would be fluctuations of spiritual power. The divine restriction cloak couldn't completely hide them. Ordinary foundation establishment cultivators wouldn't be able to detect these small fluctuations of spiritual power even if they were standing directly above him. However, if this cultivator surnamed Wu had a special method to find people, he might be able to detect it. Therefore, as soon as he entered the ground, he used all his strength to escape east. When the cultivator surnamed Wu landed on the ground on the bone vulture, Wang Daoyuan had already escaped more than 100 feet to the east. At such a long distance, separated by several hundred feet of earth and rocks, plus the divine restriction cloak, even a peak foundation establishment cultivator wouldn't be able to detect him. The cultivator surnamed Wu searched the place where Wang Daoyuan disappeared for a long time but couldn't find him. The method to track the earth escape technique was not something that ordinary people could obtain. Naturally, he did not know how to do it. The cultivator surnamed Wu was flustered and exasperated. He cast a spell and attacked the place where Wang Daoyuan disappeared. After fighting for a long time, he finally returned to the Xianyi market, filled with rage. Wang Daoyuan, who was underground, was also trembling with fear. He was not sure whether that cultivator surnamed Wu had left or not. Only after traveling for over 200 miles to the east did he dare to use his divine sense to explore the area above him. Even if they were to penetrate more than 400 feet into the ground, they wouldn't be able to probe too far upwards. Seeing that there were no traces of the enemy, he was slightly relieved. However, he did not dare to go out rashly. He took out the spirit-seeking compass and activated it with his spiritual energy. The spirit-seeking compass released a beam of spiritual energy that scanned the surroundings, looking for a temporary shelter. At a depth of over 400 feet, he had traveled for over 200 miles. The huge pressure from the earth and rocks above him made him feel a little tired. Staying underground for a long time wasn't a solution either. Even if he had enough spiritual energy, his body wouldn't be able to bear it. The beam of spiritual energy released by the spirit-seeking compass quickly returned with good news. Through the spirit-testing compass, it was determined that there was an underground karst cave about 100 feet to the right. He immediately fled to the right and soon arrived at the karst cave. The concentration of spiritual energy here was comparable to that of a second-tier low-grade spiritual vein. There would be no high-level demonic beasts nearby. Wang Daoyuan was relieved. He could rest here for a while. After being stirred up by the cultivator surnamed Wu, it was not safe to return to the Xianin market. However, he couldn't leave the Xianin market. If he wanted to go to the Gui Water Nether Spring, he must have a treasure or magic weapon that could resist the Yin Qi. Otherwise, he would freeze to death if he went down. He had the refining inheritance left by the five-element spiritual master, but after all, the five-element spiritual master didn't specialize in refining, so he didn't have a deep understanding of various magic weapons. In his inheritance, there was no mention of magic weapons that could resist the Yin Qi. If he wanted to find a way to resist the Yin Qi, it was most reliable to inquire among the evil cultivators. After all, they relied on the Yin Qi to cultivate. They were professionals in resisting the erosion of Yin Qi. Besides, even if he knew how to refine this kind of magic weapon, he must have the refining level. The magic weapon that could resist the Yin Qi of the Gui Water Nether Spring was at least a third-tier magic weapon. Bai Xing's limit was a second-tier mid-grade refining master. To reach the third-tier refining master, he didn't have to worry about the inheritance. In the experience of the five-element spiritual master, there was the inheritance of a third-tier refining master. Refining was a cross-field craft that integrated refining, forging, and pattern. With Wang Daoyuan's level of elixir, talisman, and array, it was not difficult for him to get started with refining. But to upgrade to the third tier, it would take many years of accumulation. To improve the refining level, he needed to consume various refining materials. Nearby, only the Xianin market could buy a large number of refining materials. To find the route to the Gui Water Nether Spring, obtain the method to resist the Yin Qi, and buy refining materials, all of these needed to be in the Xianin market. He rested for a while. After his body was fully recovered, he began to explore the karst cave. For safety's sake, he first released the soul-chasing bees to explore to see if there were any demonic beasts. After an hour, all the soul-chasing bees came back. There was no trace of demonic beasts in the karst cave. According to the report of the soul-chasing bees, this underground karst cave was extremely complicated and had many forks. They only flew out for more than 100 miles and encountered dozens of forks. It took them an hour to successfully return. The karst cave was eroded by the underground river. Where there was a karst cave, there must be an underground river. The underground river would constantly erode the mountain to form a karst cave. The water would flow downwards, and the underground river would constantly erode downwards. Now the karst cave here was extremely dry, without any sense of moisture, indicating that it was far from the underground river. In other words, the underground river at this time should still be very deep down. If this underground river could be as deep as the Gui Water Nether Spring, it would be easy. If the depth was enough, there was no need to find a way down. To go to the place where the Gui Water Nether Spring was located, the earth escape and the water escape were not reliable. The most reliable way was to dig a tunnel. He had thought of digging a tunnel before, but outside, this trick did not work at all. First of all, to dig from the surface to the ground, he needed to dig through many rock layers. These rock layers were extremely hard. If he dug down more than 6,000 feet, he would not be able to see the Gui Water Nether Spring without digging for 180 years. There was also the problem of where to dig. In the northern part of the mountain, in addition to the industries of the major forces, there were treasure-snatching cultivators everywhere. Digging a tunnel was such a big movement, would there not be treasure-snatching cultivators all day long to harass? This karst cave solved all the possible problems of digging a tunnel, and there was no need to consider digging through the rock layers. As long as the bottom of the karst cave was deep enough, starting from the karst cave, directly digging horizontally, encountering particularly hard rocks, it was completely bypassed, and there was no need to gnaw hard on the hard rock layers. Not to mention the concealment, the top layer of the karst cave was hundreds of feet deep from the ground. The bottom layer of the karst cave, who knows how deep it was. Even if other cultivators found this karst cave, it was fine. There were many forks in the karst cave, and ordinary cultivators did not dare to go deep. There was no need to worry about other cultivators disturbing the process of digging a tunnel. The only security threat was the demonic beasts in the underground karst cave. As long as there was no rank 3 demonic beast, the problem was not big, and he could still escape. Chapter 237. In addition, a lot of refining materials could be found in the karst cave. Exploring and finding some materials could also improve his refining level. That Wu guy sent him to such a good place, he really didn't know whether to hate him or thank him. As for the problem of the many forks in the karst cave, that was not a problem. After Wang Daoyuan's cultivation base broke through to the foundation establishment stage, the ordinary soul-chasing bee honey was no longer of much use to him. He usually only ate some royal jelly, and this honey was kept as the rations of the soul-chasing bees. The population scale of the soul-chasing bees also expanded a lot. At present, the number of soul-chasing bees in the space of the spiritual pearl had exceeded 10,000. With the soul-chasing bees opening the way, no matter how many forks there were in the karst cave, it was nothing. From the space of the spiritual pearl, he released 1,000 soul-chasing bees, let them find the karst cave that extended downwards, and ordered them to return within 2 hours. After 2 hours, all the soul-chasing bees returned. Their results were also very impressive. They found 4 or 5 passages that extended downwards. Wang Daoyuan chose the northernmost passage, because the north was the direction of the Gue water nether spring. To find a place to start digging, naturally, the closer to the destination, the better. With the soul-chasing bees exploring the way, he could always find a passage that continued downwards. However, he also encountered some trouble, that was, he couldn't determine the depth he was at. The underground karst cave was full of twists and turns, descending a distance of 10 feet, he might have to walk through more than 10 forks. Walking and stopping, tossing and turning for more than 10 days, Wang Daoyuan really couldn't determine where he was and how deep underground he was. In desperation, he could only continue to go down. No matter how deep the karst cave was, there must be a bottom. When he reached the bottom of the karst cave, it would not be too late to determine the depth. After another 5 or 6 days, he felt a trace of fire spiritual energy. Previously, the spiritual energy here was either of no attribute, earth attribute or water attribute, and he had never encountered fire attribute. Now that fire spiritual energy suddenly appeared, could it be that he was near the earth fire? He ordered the soul-chasing bees to find the source of the fire spiritual energy. Thousands of soul-chasing bees flew in the direction of the fire spiritual energy. After a quarter of an hour, all the soul-chasing bees returned. Wang Daoyuan followed their guidance and arrived at a spacious cave. This was probably the lowest level of the entire karst cave. There was only a passageway at the top. The rest of the cave was just walls. The fire spirit qi in the cave was already very rich, comparable to the fire spirit qi in the vicinity of the second stage fire spirit vein. Wang Daoyuan used his divine senses to explore the surroundings. The rocks here were very dense and hard. His divine senses could only reach a depth of a few dozen feet. There was no trace of a fire spirit vein or earth fire. Only a tiny crack was found on one of the rock walls, through which the fire spirit qi was transmitted. He immediately took out the spirit-seeking compass and activated the vermilion bird pattern on it. The vermilion bird pattern spat out a beam of fire elemental spiritual energy and probed into the rock wall along the crack. The spiritual light beam penetrated more than 300 meters and found a large space on the other side of the rock wall. There was also a magma lake on the ground. The fire attribute spiritual power was emitted from the magma lake. Moreover, in addition to fire spiritual energy, there seemed to be water spiritual energy as well. The spirit-seeking compass could only detect the general situation and could not accurately determine what it was. Wang Daoyuan became excited. A water elemental spiritual object near the magma lake was definitely not something ordinary. It was very likely to be a treasure of heaven and earth. It took him a lot of effort to reach this place. How could he easily give up on something that was suspected to be a treasure of heaven and earth? As for the 300 meters thick rock wall, it was an insurmountable moat for other foundation establishment cultivators. But for Wang Daoyuan, it was not much of a hindrance. With the dust returning flame, no matter how thick the rock wall was, it could be slowly burned through. It would just take some time. He had plenty of time now. He did not care if it took 8 or 10 years. It would take at most 10 days to half a month to break through a rock wall. He took out a portion of the dust-returning flame from the space and placed it on the rock wall. The dust-returning flame seemed to be very interested in the rock wall. As soon as the rock wall touched the dust-returning flame, it burned. The spiritual energy contained in these rocks was enough to maintain the burning of the dust-returning flame. Wang Daoyuan only needed to inject a small amount of spiritual energy and divine sense to control the dust-returning flame. After 7 or 8 days, the rock wall was finally burned into a cave that could allow one person to pass through. He passed through the rock wall and came to the space behind it. It was very spacious. The entire space covered an area of 20 to 30 mu. The magma lake was also 5 to 6 mu. The concentration of fire spiritual energy here was comparable to a high-grade rank 3 spirit vein. In addition, one could directly extract pure fire spiritual energy from the magma. For fire elemental cultivators, this was simply a paradise on earth. He was a penta spirit root cultivator. The most suitable thing for him was a non-elemental spirit vein. He was not very interested in the magma lake. His divine sense scanned the entire space and soon found a corner that contained water elemental spiritual energy. He walked forward and took a look. He was excited. He had really encountered a treasure of heaven and earth. This was the legendary earth milk. The full name of the earth milk was earth vein spirit milk. It was the essence condensed from spirit veins. The balance of the 5 elements in the earth vein spirit milk could only be condensed from non-elemental spirit veins. Furthermore, the grade of the spirit vein could not be lower than grade 3. The higher the grade of the spirit vein, the better the quality of the earth vein spirit milk. After consuming it, one could instantly recover their spiritual energy. Even spiritual wine could not compare to it. If it was 1,000-year-old earth vein spirit milk, it could even help one make a breakthrough. It was said that a drop of 10,000-year-old earth vein spirit milk produced by grade 4 spirit veins could increase one's chances of making a breakthrough to yuanying. The earth vein spirit milk was located in a corner of the space. There was a 6-meter-long stalactite above it and a bowl-sized hole below it. The remaining earth vein spirit milk was only enough for 2 to 3 mouthfuls. There was roughly 40 to 50 drops left. The earth vein spirit milk was different from what the legend said. Perhaps it was because the earth vein spirit milk was located at the edge of the lava lake where the fire spiritual energy was too dense, causing the earth vein spirit milk to have a hint of fiery red color. It should be a little over 1,000 years old. However, the quality wasn't great. After all, the non-elemental spirit vein here was only a low-grade rank 3 spirit vein. It could barely condense earth vein spirit milk, but the quality wouldn't be great. But even so, the earth vein spirit milk was still useful for Violet Palace realm cultivators. But it was a pity that the earth vein spirit milk wasn't useful for establishing the Violet Palace realm. After all, establishing the Violet Palace realm required violet qi, pure yin, and pure yang. The earth vein spirit milk contained the 5 elemental spiritual energies. After the earth vein spirit milk was produced, it was contaminated by the fire elemental spiritual energy in the magma lake, and the 5 elemental spiritual energies were already out of balance. The earth vein spirit milk could be considered a treasure for fire elemental cultivators. For fire elemental cultivators, there was no way they could consume it, and they could only exchange it for spiritual stones. Wang Daoyuan had penta-spiritual roots, so he could also consume it. He stored the earth vein spirit milk into a second-grade jade bottle and placed it in the space within the spiritual pearl. It would be a waste if he didn't try it. He took out a drop of earth vein spirit milk and didn't dare to consume it directly. After all, it was something that even Violet Palace realm cultivators could use to increase their cultivation. There was definitely a lot of spiritual energy in it. As a third-level foundation establishment cultivator, if he were to consume it rashly, he might just explode. This drop of earth vein spirit milk was only the size of a soybean. He used his spiritual energy to separate a tenth of the earth vein spirit milk from it. He cultivated the 5-elemental immortal transformation art, and his spiritual energy was denser than other cultivators of the same cultivation. So this amount of spiritual energy was still bearable for him. When he consumed the earth vein spirit milk, a surge of spiritual energy instantly entered his meridians. He immediately circulated the 5-elemental immortal transformation art and converted the spiritual energy into his own. In a few breaths' time, the spiritual energy was completely refined. However, there was too much spiritual energy in his dantian. Chapter 238. At this moment, Wang Daoyuan felt that his whole body was abnormally hot. The earth vein spirit milk was born by the magma lake and absorbed a large amount of fire attribute spiritual energy, causing the 5 elements spiritual energy to be out of balance. He continued to use his cultivation method and used half a cup of tea's time to condense the excess spiritual energy into true essence, which slightly improved his cultivation. He estimated that if he took the entire drop of earth vein spirit milk, he could directly break through to the 4th level of foundation establishment. However, the heat in his body did not recede, but instead became more intense. He only took 1/10 of a drop of earth vein spirit milk, and the side effect was so severe. If he directly took the entire drop of earth vein spirit milk, he would probably be burned to death. After another quarter of an hour, the heat turned into a burning sensation, and he felt that his whole body was about to burn up. He could not suppress it even when he used his water attribute spiritual energy. After being tortured for half a day, he took out a mysterious Yin jade gourd from the space and forcibly refined the Yin qi to suppress the burning sensation. After refining the Yin qi, a cool feeling spread from his dantian to his meridians, and the burning sensation was significantly reduced. Wang Daoyuan continued to refine the Yin qi, consuming 5 gourds of Yin qi to completely dissolve the burning sensation. Although the Yin qi was harmful to the body, it was still spiritual energy. The Yin qi and the fire attribute spiritual energy in the earth vein spirit milk dissolved each other, and his body did not suffer much damage. On the contrary, because he refined a large amount of spiritual energy, his cultivation improved a lot, and he could already try to break through to the 4th level of foundation establishment. He did not take any more earth vein spirit milk to try to break through. Instead, he carefully put away the remaining earth vein spirit milk, which was used to resist the Yin qi of the Gui water nether spring. When he was near the Gui water nether spring, if the Yin qi was too strong and he could not resist it with his spiritual energy, he could take some earth vein spirit milk. He could use the fire attribute spiritual energy in the earth vein spirit milk to resist the corrosion of the Yin qi. After taking away all the earth vein spirit milk, he did not touch the stalactite that produced it. Even if he cut it off and took it away, it was worthless. Without the support of the entire spirit vein, the stalactite could not produce earth vein spirit milk in the space of the spirit pearl. He left the space and used the earth wall technique to seal the passage, maintaining the environment that produced the earth vein spirit milk. In the northern part of the mountain, the depth of the underground magma was usually about 80,000 feet below the ground. Therefore, the depth of Wang Daoyuan's current location should be around 80,000 feet. According to 5 Elements Daoists' records, the Gui water nether spring was more than 7,000 feet underground. At this time, the place he was at was already lower than the Gui water nether spring. It was not very reliable to dig a hole close to the magma. To dig to the Gui water nether spring, it was better to dig from a similar depth. After advancing several hundred feet upward, he took out the spirit-seeking compass and determined the direction. The spirit-seeking compass and the formation measuring compass were both developed from the foundation of the compass. Determining direction was a basic function, but this function was not usually used. The 10th water spirit spring was directly north of him. After using the spirit-seeking compass to find the north direction, he released the soul-chasing bees to find a passage extending north. With the help of the karst cave, he could get as close as possible to the place where the Gui water nether spring was located and shorten the digging distance, which could save a lot of effort. With the help of the soul-chasing bees, it took him more than a month to move north for over 600 miles. During this process, he encountered many second-rank demonic beasts. With the warning of the soul-chasing bees, he successfully avoided them and did not have any conflicts. Finally, he reached the northern edge of the karst cave. Further north, there were no more karst caves. It should be more than 300 miles away from the location of the Gui water nether spring. This distance could only be covered by digging slowly. Before starting to dig, he first used the spirit-seeking compass to detect the situation in the rock formation ahead. If he dug directly, encountering demonic beasts living underground would not be a big problem. If he encountered an underground water vein, the water would rush in and the huge water pressure could instantly kill him. After probing for a while, within 500 feet, there were no demonic beasts or underground water veins. Only then did he feel relieved to start digging. Of course, his digging was not like mining, where he dug forward bit by bit. Instead, he directly released the dust-returning flame to burn the rock wall. Some rocks burned by the dust-returning flame would produce a large amount of earth attribute spirit chi, which could support the burning of the dust-returning flame. In this case, Wang Daoyuan only needed to use a small amount of spirit chi and spiritual sense to control the direction of the dust-returning flame, and the forward speed was very fast. Some rocks, after being ignited by the dust-returning flame, produced less earth attribute spirit chi, which required him to consume a large amount of spirit chi and spiritual sense to maintain the burning of the dust-returning flame. In this case, he needed to stop frequently to recover his spirit chi and spiritual sense, and the speed of his advance was greatly reduced. In this half-year, he had advanced a little more than 18 miles to the north. On average, he could advance about 1 mile every 10 days. One day, a year later, Wang Daoyuan used the spirit-seeking compass to detect the situation inside the rock wall and found a small hole the size of an adult's arm more than 200 feet in front of him. The small hole was continuous and curved, very much like a mouse hole. Other than that, he did not find any demonic beasts or underground water veins. Wang Daoyuan did not take a detour, but continued to push forward. These small holes were very useful. When he used the dust-returning flame to burn the rock wall, the flame could enter the small hole and burn the rock wall inside and outside at the same time. It was much more efficient than burning the rock wall from the front. More than 10 days later, he had advanced more than 200 feet. The small hole that he had detected earlier appeared in the rock wall. His spiritual sense followed the small hole and probed inside. He did not find any living things, only a few long hairs. The long hairs were grayish-black, and he could not be sure what kind of demonic beast left them behind. There were obvious bite marks on the inner wall of the small hole. Judging from the bite marks, the demonic beast that dug the small hole was most likely a mouse. The remaining spirit chi on the long hairs showed that this demonic beast was not very strong, only a first-rank superior. He had the soul-extinguishing bell and the vampiric vine. No matter how many first-rank demonic beasts came, they would all die. Especially in this narrow underground cave, they posed no threat to him, and he could use the cave to advance without worry. With the help of the cave, the dust-returning flame burned the rock wall much faster. It could advance about 1 mile every 5 days, doubling the speed. Of course, this was if the direction of the small hole was reliable. If the direction of the small hole deviated from the direction he was advancing, it would not be of much use. A month passed. When Wang Daoyuan used the spirit-seeking compass to probe the rock wall in front of him, he found traces of demonic beasts in the small hole for the first time. Moreover, the place where the demonic beasts were more than 100 feet away could not be called a small hole. There was a spacious cave there, and there were many mouse-type demonic beasts in the cave. Wang Daoyuan was excited. If he could control this group of mouse-type demonic beasts and make them dig a suitable hole in the rock wall, he would be able to advance every 5 days. He would be able to maintain the speed of 1 kilometer every 5 days. In this way, he would only need a little more than 4 years to dig through a distance of about 300 kilometers. Since this group of mice could be so useful, he naturally could not let them go so easily. He immediately advanced toward the group of mice. These mice were really bold. Instead of running away, they gathered together as if they were going to defend their home with their lives. After Wang Daoyuan advanced to the group of mice, he finally saw them clearly. They looked very similar to ordinary mice, with grayish-black fur. The only difference between them and ordinary mice was that their 2 front teeth were silver-white, flickering with a cold light. This was a first-rank superior demonic beast, the goldbiter rat. The goldbiter rat was usually a first-rank superior demonic beast. The king of the group could grow to a second-rank inferior demonic beast. The goldbiter rat's combat strength was not much. Their only specialty was their 2 sharp front teeth. Gnawing on hard rock and refining materials was their greatest pleasure. Chapter 239. It would be too much of a waste to kill this group of goldbiter rats. He would find the Rat King and beat it up, forcing it to recognize him as its master. Using the Rat King to command the entire group of rats to help him dig a hole and speed up his advance was the most cost-effective. When the dust-returning flame reached the cave where the rats were, Wang Daoyuan immediately withdrew the dust-returning flame for fear of harming the rats. The rats were very alert. When they saw that the dust-returning flame could burn through solid rock, they were so scared that they didn't dare move. After Wang Daoyuan withdrew the dust-returning flame, the rats looked at him eagerly. They wanted to surround and attack him, but they were also afraid that he would release the terrifying flame again. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, a foot-long rat crawled over. This rat looked similar to the other goldbiter rats, but its front teeth were golden and it was 3 times longer than the other goldbiter rats. The spirit energy fluctuations on its body showed that it was a low-grade rank 2 demon beast, and not far from mid-rank 2. Its cultivation was similar to Wang Daoyuan's. It squeaked at the group of rats, and the rats began to stir. After a while, over 100 high-grade rank 1 goldbiter rats charged at Wang Daoyuan. Wang Daoyuan wanted to lure the Rat King out, so he didn't directly subdue them. Instead, he used Earth Attribute Spirit Energy to create a protective barrier. The goldbiter rats surrounded the barrier and gnawed at it, but the Earth Attribute Spirit Energy within the barrier had the corrosive effect of the dust-returning flame. When the rats gnawed at it, their front teeth would also be corroded. Wang Daoyuan could use his spirit energy to constantly replenish the barrier. If he ran out of spirit energy, he could drink scarlet blood wine to recover. After 15 minutes, the goldbiter rats that had pounced first had their front teeth mostly corroded and were unable to continue gnawing at the barrier. The Rat King was flustered and exasperated as it hopped around in place. Another 100 or so goldbiter rats charged forward and continued gnawing at the barrier. The result was no different. They had only gnawed for 15 minutes before their front teeth were too short. The other goldbiter rats in the group didn't dare to advance. After a few squeaks, the Rat King personally charged forward. He was just waiting for it to come out. This fellow had been hiding in the rat hole this entire time. Wang Daoyuan was afraid that if he used his true strength, the Rat King would escape through the rat hole. At that time, he would no longer have the chance to capture the Rat King. The speed at which the dust-returning flame burned the stone wall was far slower than the speed at which the Rat King escaped through the rat hole. Now that the Rat King had come out to seek death, things would be much easier. When Wang Daoyuan summoned the soul-extinguishing bell, he only unleashed 10% of its power. All the rank 1 goldbiter rats had fainted. The Rat King was also in a daze. It couldn't even stand properly. Wang Daoyuan used the quagmire technique to trap the Rat King. The Rat King sank into the swamp, unable to move. The swamp was created by Earth attribute spiritual energy and was corrosive. The Rat King had no choice but to circulate its spiritual energy to resist the corrosion. Wang Daoyuan transmitted his voice to it, either you submit to me, or you die. It wasn't difficult for a rank 2 demonic beast to understand these words. However, the Rat King was still the king of its race. It had its own pride and was unwilling to submit so easily. Wang Daoyuan summoned the returning dust flame, and with the Rat King as the center, it formed a circle of fire with a diameter of 3 feet. Following that, the circle of fire slowly shrank. As the flames burned, there was already a 1-inch deep hole in the ground. Seeing that the fire was about to reach its tail, the Rat King let out a whine, expressing its submission. Wang Daoyuan didn't withdraw the returning dust flame or the quagmire technique, but the circle of fire stopped shrinking. He sent his voice to the Rat King, don't resist. After I complete the master recognition, I'll let you go. If you dare to resist, I'll burn you with fire. The Rat King obediently nodded, expressing that it didn't dare to resist. Wang Daoyuan began to use the master recognition technique from the spirit controlling secret scripture. After a quarter of an hour, the master recognition was completed. With a single thought, the Rat King immediately rolled on the ground in pain. The master recognition was indeed a success. Wang Daoyuan withdrew the returning dust flame and the quagmire technique. Since its life was saved, the Rat King happily jumped around. A day later, all the unconscious goldbiter rats woke up. Through the Rat King, Wang Daoyuan ordered the rats to dig holes in the rocks. It was better to dig a few holes in one place at the same time. When he released the returning dust flame, the flames surged into the holes and burned at the same time, doubling the speed. He originally wanted the goldbiter rats to dig holes in the front while he burned the rocks in the back. However, these goldbiter rats were too cowardly. When they saw the returning dust flame, they fled in all directions, not daring to dig holes at all. With no other choice, he could only have them dig holes first. After they dug a mile forward, he would release the returning dust flame when the goldbiter rats retreated. The speed of burning the rocks was much faster. They could advance a mile in 2 days, but they couldn't keep burning. After advancing a mile, he would stop burning and release the goldbiter rats to dig holes. It would take the goldbiter rats 3 days to dig a mile-long hole in the hard rock. Overall, they were advancing a mile every 5 days on average. However, Wang Daoyuan had 3 days to cultivate every 5 days. He had to give the goldbiter rats some benefits in order to make them work. Otherwise, they would slack off. Fortunately, the goldbiter rats weren't picky eaters. They could eat watermelon rinds, bones, and rotten wood. He felt a little guilty for letting the goldbiter rats dig holes with their lives just for some leftover materials from the spatial dimension. With enough time to cultivate, Wang Daoyuan's cultivation also improved. A month after subduing the goldbiter rats, his cultivation finally broke through to the 4th level of foundation establishment. There were also changes in the spatial dimension. The density of spirit qi increased by a lot, reaching the level of a high-grade tier 2 spirit vein. However, the size of the spatial dimension didn't change. After testing it with incense, he found that the flow of time didn't change either. It was still 40 times faster. Wang Daoyuan used his clone to observe the boundaries of the spatial dimension and found something unusual. When he first discovered the spatial dimension, he looked out from the inside and saw a hazy gray fog everywhere. There was a trace of purple in the gray. Now, the purple was clearly less and the gray fog was thinner. In places where the gray fog was extremely thin, he could vaguely see a large patch of pitch-black space through the fog. After carefully observing for a long time, his clone also found that there seemed to be a slight crack at the edge of the spatial dimension. The gray fog was leaking out from the crack. However, the speed of the leakage was very slow and the spatial dimension wasn't affected. It seemed that this spiritual pearl had been seriously damaged before. This advancement only increased the density of spirit chi, but the spatial dimension didn't increase and the flow of time didn't accelerate. It might be related to this damage. If this damage couldn't be repaired, the spatial dimension and the flow of time probably wouldn't change in the future. The current spatial dimension and flow of time were enough. As long as the density of spirit chi increased and he could grow tier 3 spirit plants, it would be fine. In the future, when his cultivation was higher and he found a high-grade spirit item, he might be able to repair the crack on the spiritual pearl. It was useless to think about it now. It was better to set fire to the rocks and reach the location of the Gui water nether spring as soon as possible to obtain the water attribute spirit fire. Improving his own strength was the most important. It was fine as long as the spatial dimension of the spiritual pearl was enough. After consolidating his cultivation at the 4th level of foundation establishment, he continued to release the dust-returning flame to burn the rock walls. The density of spirit chi in the spatial dimension increased and the dust-returning flame burned more vigorously. The speed of burning the rocks also increased slightly. However, the speed of advancement didn't increase. The closer he got to the Gui water nether spring, the more underground water veins there were. In order to save his life, Wang Daoyuan could only bypass these water veins. He couldn't advance in a straight line, so the distance he needed to dig was longer. Chapter 240. Originally, it was estimated that it would take more than 4 years to dig up the Gui water nether spring. Now that he had to change directions, it would probably take 6 or 7 years. If something else happened, it would take even longer. Fortunately, this group of goldbiter rats was really capable. They did this kind of high-intensity physical work every day, only eating leftovers, and still found the time to expand the population. 5 years later, the number of goldbiter rats had expanded from 3 to 400 to more than 2,000. If it wasn't for Wang Daoyuan restricting the rats' food, the number of rats would have already exceeded 10,000. However, the more rats there were, the stronger they were. With more rats, they could make more holes, and he could burn the rocks much faster. In 5 years, the cave had gone through many twists and turns. It was still a dozen miles away from the estimated location of the Gui water nether spring. The last part of the journey was the most difficult part. Near the Gui water nether spring, there were rock cracks everywhere, and the cracks were filled with underground water. In addition, he also encountered the Earth Terminus Spirit Vein. The spirit chi produced by the Earth Terminus Spirit Vein carried a natural evil aura. The evil aura in the profound Yin spring probably came from this Earth Terminus Spirit Vein. Fortunately, he had the spirit-seeking compass. The evil aura would seriously interfere with the compass. When the spirit chi beam encountered the evil aura, the entire compass would spin randomly. After discovering the abnormality of the compass, Wang Daoyuan immediately changed directions and pushed in another direction. However, there were too many rock cracks nearby. 100 feet in a straight line could take 7 or 8 turns. After more than a year, he finally reached a place only 200 or 300 feet away from the Gui water nether spring. The cave passed through the water veins and rock cracks. Some of the cracks were only a little more than 3 feet apart, so the passage had to pass through the middle. He had to use the earth wall technique to strengthen the rock layer. The spirit chi used to cast the earth wall technique was converted from fire attribute spirit chi. The original earth attribute spirit chi had the corrosive characteristics of the dust returning flame. Using it to strengthen the rock might backfire. This Gui water nether spring was also very domineering. When the spirit chi beam of the spirit-seeking compass passed through, it was annihilated as soon as it touched the spring water. He used his divine sense to investigate, and his divine sense was instantly devoured. There was even a power in the spring water that extended along with his divine sense. He was so scared that he immediately cut off his divine sense to avoid being injured by the power of the Gui water nether spring. The power in this Gui water nether spring seemed to be able to directly harm the soul. 20 to 30 zhang of rock couldn't completely block the yin qi of the Gui water nether spring. Wang Daoyuan could already feel a bone-piercing chill from where he was. He could only consume a small amount of earth vein spirit essence to resist the yin qi. He didn't rashly break through the last 20 to 30 feet of the rock stratum. Instead, he gathered pure yin qi here. The purity of the yin energy here was so high that it was almost undetectable in the outside world. If he didn't collect some, it would be a huge loss. Furthermore, the Gui water nether spring had the ability to harm souls. When collecting the phase in the spring water, one's soul might be severely injured. It would be best to collect more pure yin qi, cultivate the inky jade lotus, and store more lotus seeds and lotus roots. If one's soul was heavily injured, it was very likely that one would faint directly. If one fainted beside the Gui water nether spring, it would be impossible to wake up again. Before burning through the last 20 to 30 feet of the wall, he would first eat some lotus roots and lotus seeds. Once his soul was injured, he would be able to recover quickly and wouldn't faint on the spot. The inky jade lotus had been growing in the space of the spirit bead for about 1,000 years. If it wasn't for the lack of pure yin qi, it would have bloomed and borne seeds many times. Now that the pure yin qi was abundant, and the time flow in the space of the spirit bead was 40 times faster, it wouldn't take long for it to bloom and bear seeds. He filled the profound yin jade gourd with pure yin qi, put the gourd into the space of the spirit bead, and handed it to the avatar. The avatar injected the pure yin qi in the jade gourd into the pond where the inky jade lotus was planted. In less than a quarter of an hour, the inky jade lotus continued to grow new lotus stems, and there was a small bud on the lotus stem. 3 days later, the first bud bloomed. The flower of the inky jade lotus was pure black, as if it was carved from a whole piece of inky jade. The name of the inky jade lotus was indeed worthy. At this time, 5 inky jade lotus plants had grown 20 flower buds. 5 lotus flowers had bloomed, and there was no longer a new lotus stem growing, and the pure yin qi was exhausted. Wang Daoyuan summoned the avatar Wu Yi and Li Qingxuan from the space of the spirit bead, and asked them to help collect the pure yin qi. The avatar Bai Sheng was responsible for injecting the pure yin qi into the lotus pond. A huge amount of pure yin qi was constantly injected into the lotus pond. Half a month had passed outside the space, and more than a year had passed inside the space. All the lotus seeds of the inky jade lotus had matured. The yield of lotus seeds was a bit low, and each lotus pod only bore 5 or 6 lotus seeds. 20 lotus pods, a total of 108 lotus seeds were harvested. After the inky jade lotus bloomed and bore seeds, it would not wither, but could bloom and bear seeds many times. There was no need to rush to replant it. Leaving a dozen lotus seeds with good quality for planting later, the rest of the lotus seeds could be consumed. He swallowed a lotus seed to see how effective the medicine was. After swallowing the lotus seed, he immediately ran the cultivation technique to refine the lotus seed. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the lotus seed was completely refined, and a pure yin qi with medicinal power poured into the meridians. This yin qi was very gentle. After entering the meridians, he only felt a little cool, and there was no bone-piercing chill. Continuing to run the cultivation technique, this yin qi was introduced into the meridians of the head. The foundation establishment cultivator had not yet opened the Zifu, and the meridians connecting the Naiwan Palace and other acupoints of the body had not been opened, and the yin qi could not be directly sent into the sea of consciousness. It could only be sent to the head first, so that the yin qi passed through the body and gradually penetrated into the sea of consciousness. After half a day, about half of the yin qi penetrated into the sea of consciousness, and the rest of the yin qi was scattered to various parts of the body. The yin qi and medicinal properties that penetrated into the sea of consciousness were absorbed by the soul, and he only felt a burst of relaxation. In order to control the avatar, his soul lost 10%. The medicinal power of this lotus seed made his soul recover by 1,000th. He only needed to take 100 more lotus seeds, and his soul could be restored completely. The rest of the lotus seeds would be needed in an emergency, and he was not in a hurry to restore his soul for the time being. After the two avatars filled more than 30 profound yin jade gourds with pure yin qi, Wang Daoyuan took them back into the spiritual bead space. The problem of the Gui water nether spring hurting the soul could be temporarily stabilized by the lotus seeds. The spiritual objects bred in the spring water could also be put into the spiritual bead space. The last problem was the pressure of the water. According to the records of the 5 elements spiritual master, the place where the Gui water nether spring was located was an irregular spherical space with a diameter of about 10 feet, and the whole space was filled with spring water. The amount of water in the Gui water nether spring was very large, and the huge water pressure squeezed the surrounding rocks out of the cracks, and the spring water flowed up along the cracks. The 5 elements spiritual master, with his Jindan stage cultivation base, could only hold on for a quarter of an hour inside, and then quickly left. With his cultivation base, if he did not take any measures and directly went in, there was absolutely no chance of survival. In addition, he had to think about how to get out alive after getting the treasures in the Gui water spirit spring. After digging out the 20 to 30 feet stone wall, the spring water flowed out along the passage he came from, and blocked the passage. If he wanted to go out, he could only rely on the smoke escape. The distance from here to the karst cave was more than 300 miles. The passage twisted and turned, and the total length was more than 1,000 miles. Moreover, in this kind of passage, he needed to change direction frequently, and the speed of the smoke escape was greatly affected. With a passage of more than 1,000 miles, it would take more than a day to reach the karst cave. If he stayed in the spring water of the Gui water nether spring for a day, even if he had the earth vein spiritual essence, he would still freeze to death. If these two problems were not solved, he would absolutely not dare to break through the last 20 feet. Chapter 241. After thinking for a long time, he came up with a method. In his previous life, he had seen a deity who could not catch anything and drained the water in anger. This method could be used as a reference. Taking out the things in the Gui water nether spring was like fishing. Since fishing was not easy, he would drain the water and go in to pick up the fish. Where to put the water was also a problem. He was reluctant to put it into the space of the spirit pearl. This water yin qi was too strong. If it was introduced into the space of the spirit pearl, besides the inky jade lotus, many spirit plants and spirit beasts, as well as the soul-chasing bees, would not survive. It was better to introduce it underground. Find a suitable place, dig an underground water storage space, and lead the water into the water storage space. The space where the Gui water nether spring was located was only so big. After draining the spring water, some of the water that flowed into the rock cracks would flow back, and there would be spring water that would constantly gush out from the spring. Therefore, this water storage space could not be too small. For safety reasons, it was better to be prepared. Below the passage, he dug out a space that was 300 meters in length, width, and height. According to 5 elements spiritual master's estimation, the Gui water nether spring would gush out a few hundred kilograms of water in a breath of time. To fill a space that was 300 meters in length, width, and height, this was not something that could be done in a day or two. In this way, he would have enough time to collect the spirit items that the Gui water nether spring produced. Of course, to open up such a large space, it would take a lot of effort. In order to get the treasures in the Gui water nether spring, he had already dug a hole underground for nearly 8 years. The remaining work was nothing. He did not choose to dig near the Gui water nether spring. The yin qi here was too heavy. If he stayed for a long time, his body would not be able to bear it. Especially the main force of digging the hole, the rat group, could not bear the Yin Qi near the Gui water nether spring. In a place far away from the nether spring, digging this water storage space, and then digging a water channel to connect to the nether spring would be much faster. Next, he used the spirit-seeking compass to explore the surroundings of the channel, looking for a suitable place to dig a large space. Finally, he found a suitable place 500 meters away from the Gui water nether spring. In this place, there were fewer rock cracks underground. The closest crack to the channel was also 300 meters underground. It was not a problem to dig 100 meters underground space here. This place was far enough away from the Gui water nether spring. The Yin Qi in the spring water didn't affect this place too much. Rank 1 gold-devouring rats were completely capable of burrowing here. The water storage space needed to be opened up in a very deep place below the passageway. It must not be dug above the passageway. Otherwise, if the hole dug could not be blocked, it would be impossible to come in again. Even if he successfully took away the treasure bred in the Gui water nether spring this time, this place was not without value. The source of the nether water river, which the nether sect relied on for survival, was here. If he needed to deal with the underworld sect in the future, he only needed to destroy the Gui water nether spring, and the nether water river would have no Yin Qi. In the future, when his array formation cultivation reached the 3rd level of upper grade, he would be able to extract the source of the spirit vein. The Gui water nether spring was once a grade 5 spirit spring, and its source was a true treasure. In addition, since this place could produce the Gui water nether spring, there must be something even deeper underground. With his current strength, it was already extremely difficult for him to take away the treasure nurtured in the netherworld spring. He could only think about other things. However, he had to leave some leeway for his future plans. It was just like a master playing chess. When he had free time, he could casually place a piece that could be of great use in the future. This Gui water nether spring was an idle piece. If he left this idle piece now, in the future when he fought against the underworld sect, it could be used as a killing move to kill the underworld sect. He first dug a 2-foot square hole in the ground of the passageway. He released the returning dust flame, burning it all the way down. After pushing down 100 feet, he expanded the width of the passageway from 2 feet to 100 feet. Pushing down another 100 feet, he dug out an underground space that was 100 feet deep, 100 feet long, and 2 feet wide. This was the initial form of an underground water storage space. After that, he did not continue down, but instead pushed in the direction of the Gui water nether spring. He let the gold biter rats down, and had them drill holes in the rock. The gold biter rats had drilled out more than 1,000 holes in the 100-foot square rock wall. Each hole was 100 feet deep. After digging the holes, all the gold biter rats retreated. Wang Daoyuan personally went down, and set fire to the rock. Fortunately, the rock here contained a lot of earth attribute spirit energy, and there was very little ash. Wang Daoyuan did not need to expend too much spirit energy in consciousness, nor did he need to worry about the problem of burning ash taking up space. He only needed to control the returning dust flame, and prevent the fire from spreading downwards or upwards. Even so, it was not easy to dig out such a large underground space. It took several months to open up this underground water storage space that was 100 feet in length, width, and height. Next, he had to dig out a channel to lead the water from the Gui water nether spring into the water storage space. This work was not easy. The distance between the water storage space and the Gui water nether spring was more than 400 feet in a straight line. Digging out a channel to lead the water would inevitably require him to take a detour to avoid the cracks in the rock. The actual length of the channel was definitely more than 400 feet. If he directly burned it, it would probably take several months. If he let the gold biter rats dig, ordinary gold biter rats would not be able to withstand the invasion of Yin Qi. In the end, he set his sights on the Rat King. The Rat King was a low-rank 2-demon beast. Its ability to withstand Yin Qi was far from what ordinary gold biter rats could compare to. When he had pushed in before, the Rat King had only commanded the ordinary gold biter rats to work. Now, he could only let it personally do the work. In order to increase the Rat King's enthusiasm for work, Wang Daoyuan took out 100 core condensing pills. For every 10 feet the Rat King dug a hole, he would be rewarded with a core condensing pill. This was a pill used by Foundation establishment cultivators to increase their cultivation. It was also useful for demon beasts. The Rat King looked at the core condensing pills, its bean-sized rat eyes emitting a light of desire. Its enthusiasm for work soared in an instant, revealing its 3-inch-long golden incisors. Under Wang Daoyuan's guidance, it dug in the direction of the Gui water nether spring. Under the Rat King's golden incisors, the hard rock walls were like tofu. In 2 hours, it could gnaw out a passage of more than 10 feet. 5 days later, the distance between the channel and the Gui water nether spring was less than 10 feet. After opening up this 10 feet distance, the channel would be connected to the bottom of the Gui water nether spring. The Rat King was unwilling to continue digging. The yin qi in the channel was already very dense. If it continued to dig, it would not be able to withstand it. The remaining distance could only be burned by the returning dust flame. Wang Daoyuan came to the channel, took out a ball of returning dust flame, and threw it into the end of the channel with his spiritual sense and spiritual power. At such a long distance, he could not use his spiritual sense to control it. At this time, there was no need to control it. As long as it could burn through the last 10 feet, the spring water would automatically extinguish the returning dust flame. After arranging the channel, he left the underground water storage space and sealed the water storage space to prevent the spring water from filling up the water storage space and spreading to the channel above. After that, he came to the end of the channel that he had previously dug. This was the place where he was going to enter the Gui water nether spring. It was still 20 to 30 feet away from the Gui water nether spring. After the channel was opened, he would quickly dig through the 20 to 30 feet thick rock wall. He used the spirit-seeking compass to observe the situation of the channel. 2 hours later, the returning dust flame finally burned through the channel. The yin qi of the nether spring water, along the 1-foot diameter channel, quickly flowed into the water storage space. Wang Daoyuan continued to send out the Rat King to gnaw through the 20 to 30 feet thick rock wall. The Rat King did not disappoint. In 2 hours, it dug out a small hole nearly 20 feet long. After that, because it could not withstand the yin qi, it retreated from the small hole. Wang Daoyuan released the returning dust flame, widening the small hole dug by the Rat King until it could accommodate one person. When all the spring water accumulated in the Gui water nether spring flowed into the water storage space, he opened the last layer of rock wall between the channel and the Gui water nether spring. After swallowing a drop of earth vein spirit milk, he entered the Gui water nether spring. Chapter 242. The water of the Gui water nether spring had been drawn into the water storage space, and the yin qi here was not that scary. Even so, Wang Daoyuan felt a bone-piercing cold, as if his soul was about to be frozen, and he was about to turn into an ice sculpture. Fortunately, the fire attribute of the earth vein spirit essence began to take effect, and a warm feeling flowed throughout his body. Although he still felt cold, but there was no bone-piercing cold, and the feeling of his soul being frozen. Relying on the earth vein spirit essence, he was barely able to resist the invasion of the yin qi. At this time, he looked down at the mouth of the nether spring. He saw that the mouth of the spring was filled with black spring water, and the spring water emitted a black beam of light. This black beam of light should be emitted by the spirit object that was nurtured in the spring water. The concentration of the spiritual qi of this Gui water nether spring was much higher than his own jade dragon spring, and was at least a 4th step spirit spring. He swallowed another drop of earth vein spirit essence, and came to the mouth of the spring. He was still not sure what the spirit object was, and did not know how to take it out. The power of his spiritual sense could not be used easily, as this spirit object may have the effect of damaging the soul. He first took out the sharp metal sword, and tried to pick out the spirit object. This sharp metal sword was a 1st step upper grade magical weapon, and was obtained by killing Zheng Kong when he first came to the Green Willow region. When the sharp metal sword entered the spring water, it was frozen and broken into several pieces. Then, he took out the Profound Yang sword. The Profound Yang sword was made of a stronger material, but when it entered the spring water, it was not much better than the sharp metal sword, and also broke into several pieces. He was still not reconciled, and took out the second step lower grade magical weapon Flat Wave Sword. After entering the spring water, the Flat Wave Sword did not immediately break, but successfully touched the spirit object. He wanted to pick out the spirit object, but it was useless. The Flat Wave Sword directly passed through the spirit object, and after the sword came out of the water, the spring water still emitted a black beam of light. But the tip of the sword carried a wisp of black flame, which became smaller and smaller, and finally extinguished. The Flat Wave Sword was also completely scrapped. It seems that the spirit object that was nurtured in the Gue Water Nether Spring was indeed a spirit fire. But how to take out the spirit fire was also a troublesome matter. Using things to pick it out was obviously not reliable. Sucking it up was a way, but he did not have that kind of magical weapon. Besides, ordinary magic tools could not withstand the power of the Gue Water Nether Spring and the Black Flame. Wang Daoyuan used the water dragon technique and controlled the water dragon to enter the spring and bring out the spiritual fire. Unfortunately, as soon as the water dragon entered the spring water, it immediately dissipated. This method would not work either. After squatting beside the spring for less than 100 breaths of time, he felt a bone-piercing chill. Even his soul felt an extremely strong chill. The fire attribute spiritual energy of the earth vein spiritual elixir was no longer enough to resist the yin qi. He converted all the spiritual energy in his body into fire spiritual energy, and then used the fire armor technique. A fiery red armor covered his whole body. Wang Daoyuan felt a little better, but this was not a long-term solution. Even the fire armor art couldn't completely block the yin qi's invasion. He wouldn't be able to hold on for more than a quarter of an hour. After pondering for a moment, he still could not think of a way to retrieve the flame seed. The fire seed was the core of the spiritual fire. As long as the fire seed was not extinguished, no matter how weak the spiritual fire was, as long as there was a sufficient supply of spiritual energy, it could recover very quickly. Without the fire seed, the spiritual fire would become a water without a source, a tree without roots. If there was no suitable fuel, it would soon be extinguished. If he couldn't retrieve the fire seed of the spiritual fire, it would be meaningless no matter how much spiritual fire he took out. After pondering for a while, he still couldn't think of a way to retrieve the fire seed. He could only take a risk with the power of spiritual sense. If he could successfully retrieve the fire seed, as long as his soul was not directly burned, it was acceptable to suffer some damage. However, he still had to make some preparations. He first swallowed 2 black jade lotus seeds. After refining them, he sent their medicinal properties into the meridians in his head. Then in his sea of consciousness, he condensed a soul-splitting blade. Once the soul was ignited by the black spiritual fire, he would use the soul-splitting blade to cut off the burning part of the soul. Wang Daoyuan used his spiritual sense to explore the spring water. As soon as his spiritual sense touched the spring water, it immediately ignited a black flame. Previously, when he used the Flat Wave Sword to find the approximate location of the fire seed, he did not hesitate. The power of his spiritual sense burst out and separated the spring water. After a breath of time, an inch-tall black flame appeared in the middle of the spring water. The shape of this flame was similar to the flame of an ordinary oil lamp. It looked ordinary, but the color was as black as ink. He did not dare to dawdle. The power of his spiritual sense was rapidly burning. In a short time, the power of his spiritual sense was consumed by more than half. If this continued, after 19 breaths, he would pass out because of the exhaustion of his spiritual sense. He used the power of his spiritual sense to wrap the black flame and pulled it towards him. The black flame left the spring water with the power of his spiritual sense and flew towards his head. When it was about a foot away from his head, he immediately controlled the space of the spiritual pearl and took the black flame in. However, this flame did not care about fire principles. It resisted the suction of the spiritual pearl and entered his sea of consciousness, burning towards his soul. If this continued, wouldn't his soul be completely burned? In desperation, his soul escaped into the spiritual pearl space. The black flame chased his soul into the spiritual pearl space. Wang Daoyuan also brought the previously condensed soul-splitting blade into the spiritual pearl space. The black flame quickly burned his soul. He immediately controlled the soul-splitting blade and cut off the part of his soul that was burning. The rest of his soul that was not ignited quickly escaped from the spiritual pearl space. After the black flame burned the part of the soul that was cut off, it wanted to continue to chase the main soul. The spiritual pearl space had been closed, and it could not come out. The soul withdrew from the space, and the black flame was locked in the spiritual pearl space. Wang Daoyuan only felt a splitting headache. Looking inside his sea of consciousness, he found that his soul was only about 70% of the complete situation. Controlling the divided soul only used 10% of the soul. This time, the black flame burned away 20%. Fortunately, he took 2 lotus seeds in advance. At the moment, he could barely stay awake. The bank of the Gui water nether spring was not a place to stay for a long time. The cold yin qi was constantly eroding. If he stayed for a while, he was afraid that he would die here. He immediately fled to the passage and left the Gui water nether spring. After entering the passage, regardless of the serious injury of his soul, he forcibly cast the earth wall technique to seal the passage and prevent the yin qi from continuing to leak out. He now had a splitting headache and could not hold on for too long. He could only condense a 50 or 60 feet thick stone wall first. Subsequently, he immediately fled to a place more than 1,000 feet away from the Gui water nether spring. There was not much yin qi here. Previously, for the sake of insurance, he put more than 10 black jade lotus seeds into the storage bag and put them on his body. Now that he did not dare to open the spiritual pearl space, these more than 10 lotus seeds came in handy. He immediately consumed 3 lotus seeds to stabilize his soul's injuries. After 7 or 8 days, he took a total of 10 lotus seeds. The soul injury was stabilized, and he no longer had a splitting headache. It was just that his soul was seriously damaged, and he felt that his thinking had become dull. At this time, he still had 3 lotus seeds left as a backup to prevent the black jade lotus in the spiritual pearl space from being burned by the black flame. His soul was now incomplete by nearly 30%. Without the black jade lotus, he would not be able to open up the Zifu in this life. He did not know how the spiritual pearl space was damaged by the black flame. It was impossible for it to dominate the entire space. After all, the life spiritual fire and the returning dust flame were not to be trifled with. After the black flame left the Gui water nether spring, there was no high-quality water attribute spiritual power and yin qi supply. Its endurance was definitely not good. The life spiritual fire was supported by the mysterious peach tree sapling, and the returning dust flame could also burn the soil in the space to obtain spiritual power. In a war of attrition, the black flame was far worse. He did not dare to rashly use the power of spiritual sense to explore the situation in the spiritual pearl space. If the black flame chased after his soul and burned it, he would lose part of his soul and become a fool. He communicated with the clone and observed the situation in the entire spiritual pearl space through the clone. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.